our agenda has two items from the old business case and then two in the new. And our first one is the discussion of findings of fact for the Jones application. Thank you for recording, Anthony.
Yep.
Is there anything you would like to do to introduce this topic more than me just saying that much?
Well, I think it would be helpful for our attorney to introduce himself and maybe for you guys to introduce yourself to him. So, Phil.
Yeah, hi, Anthony, and hi, members of the board. I'm Phil Saucier. I'm the town attorney for the town. And what I'd like to do very quickly, and actually, why don't we introduce ourselves first, and then I'll get into the Board of Appeals order.
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, Phil. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Peter Rushton. I'm the chair of the planning board. I've been on this board for quite some time now. So, next.
Thank you.
Hi, Phil. I'm George Seal.
Hi, George.
I think you might know my wife, Becky.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, I do. Did not know that was your Becky was your wife.
Hi, Phil. I'm Craig Alexander.
Hi, Craig.
Hi.
And Phil, those are the three members who are with us tonight, are Peter, George, and Craig.
Okay, and it's a 5-member board.
It is.
And
although
so
one of the members has been newly seated and was not involved in this case initially.
Okay, so there's one member that was involved that's not here tonight.
Yes, and we also have an alternate who was involved in the case as well.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, so I've listened to the last couple meetings that you've had, so was aware of this application as it went along, although I wasn't obviously involved with, the board portions of it. I've now since listened to the last couple meetings. And just very briefly where we are today, your decision was appealed to the Board of Appeals. And there's a requirement under Maine law that any decision contains written findings that goes through each of the standards. I know that you did go through the standards. I listened to your hearing, but they need to be in writing. And the reason for that is so that the board and potentially subsequent tribunals have a basis to review the decision that you made. And so that's why it's important. So what everyone agreed to do and that the board actually did was to just simply remand this back to you before we get too far down along the way. I think that's the prudent way to do it. And so now it's back in front of this board. You'll see that I did present a draft findings, which simply is a template more than anything, and it had information that was involved in the public record, the application, and I started putting in some of your rationale where you had articulated it on the record. So where I could glean that from the last couple of hearings, where I couldn't, I left it blank. At the end of the day, though, this is your findings fact, not mine. So even where I may have put in draft findings, it's important for you to review this as a board, come to some understanding whether you agree to it or not, or whether there's edits to it. It's important that it's yours. So I think it's important. I think what I recommend doing, and defer to the chair, is to just simply start working our way through it. I would just say that the board's order, which I think you guys have all gotten a copy of it, the Board of Appeals order, remanded it back to you just simply to do these written findings, so to go through and articulate the rationale for why you made your decision, but not, and they specifically said, will not reopen the proceedings for further public hearing or submittal of additional testimony, statements, evidence, documents, or other materials. So in other words, you've made your decision. That's not being relitigated. That will be appealed, and so there's an opportunity for people to discuss your decision and whether they agree with it or not. But right now, all we're doing is essentially memorializing what you did, so they can go back up to the Board of Appeals. Are there any questions at this stage before we move in?
Nope.
Okay. So I'm going to start, and I think you all have, this has been distributed. The first paragraph, the first few paragraphs are findings of fact, which are really purely factual in nature that were gleaned from the application, what they're applying for. So the applicants applied for an after the fact shoreland permit for a previously constructed 2-story, 1,028 square foot structure with garage, laundry room, and playroom on the first floor with 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms on the second floor with 1 bathroom. I'm calling out the project. Located at 326 Sandy Cove Road, tax map 20, lot 10, and that's the property as we go forward in this document. The total lot is 53,641 square feet, 1.23 acres. It's located within the shoreline zone and specifically within the certain sub-district. I didn't know that from the application.
It's limited residential.
Okay. Property and stop me there when we get to this the actual provisions below. We'll stop and have a discussion under each one, but I'm just reading these to see if everyone agrees with this sort of factual, and stop me if there's a mistake or if there's an edit or if otherwise misrepresented it. The property has an existing 3-bedroom residence and an additional structure on the lot for a total of 2,087 square feet and a concrete sewage disposal system with a capacity of 1,000 gallons. There are 9,312 square feet of unvegetated surface and 9,500 square feet of cleared openings of woody vegetation. Again, this was just right from the application. The code enforcement officer issued a subsurface wastewater permit for the project on February 25th, 2020. I got that from testimony in one of the last 2 hearings. The applicants submitted their original application on, and I didn't know that date. I knew it was sometime last year. And then a revised shoreline permit with a site plan on February 13th, 2020. I got that date from Mr. Cunningham's application that was resubmitted. We can fill that in later if the office knows when that originally, entered the town. The above described application was initially presented to the planning board, and maybe someone can help me here just with the procedure. I saw that at least November was the earliest I saw it show up on your calendar. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe it's November 21st
Okay.
of 2019, but I would double check that with Nick in the town office.
Yeah, certainly not 1999, which is what I have.
No, not that. No, it hasn't been
Right.
around that long, and neither have we.
It hasn't been that long. Okay, sorry, that was a mistake.
Peter, you might have been on the board back in
My
1999.
brain
but
is clearly not in this decade right now. Following a site visit on November 23rd, 2019, and receipt of the revised application, the board continued its review on February 20th and June 18th. The board also received written submissions from attorney Chris Nagel on behalf of abutters Jeff and Carolyn Stiff. Following discussion of the applicable shoreline zoning ordinance provisions and hearing from members of the public, the board unanimously voted to approve the application with conditions on August 6, 2020. Am I missing any meetings where you may have discussed this application? So I have November, February, June, and August. Again, we can finalize this after the meeting, because my plan is to send this back to you one last time, and you'll just make sure it's correct and you'll adopt it.
That all appears correct.
yeah,
Thank you. Okay.
we had a big gap because of the, shutdown.
The COVID. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So after appeal of the planning board approval by John T. Sutton and Jeffrey and Carol Stiff on September 23rd, 2020, the Belgrade Board of Appeals remanded the matter back to the planning board to prepare a written decision with findings of fact and conclusions of the law from the testimony, statements, evidence, documents, and other materials that were submitted to it on the 8 criteria in ordinance section 16D, including any conditions of approval it attached and the reasons for those conditions. I just borrowed that from the order. Under the Board of Appeals order, the planning board, quote, will not reopen the proceedings for further public hearing or submittal of additional testimony, statements, evidence, documents, or other materials. And then finally, the planning board met on October 1st, 2020 to develop these findings of fact and conclusions of law consistent with the Board of Appeals order. So next we're going to jump into the conclusions of law. In other words, applying the facts that you gleaned to the applicable ordinance standards. So based on the application materials, testimonies, statements, evidence, documents, and other materials submitted to it and the above findings of fact, the Belgrade Planning Board finds that the project is a permitted accessory structure to a residential use under section 14, table 1 in the ordinance, and further makes the following conclusions based on the applicable provisions in section 16D of the ordinance. before we go on to number one, I want to say that I did add this permitted accessory structure, and I want to make sure everyone agrees with that, because that was a discussion that you had that I heard during the meeting, and you came to that conclusion at a certain point in your last two meetings. So I wanted to make sure that got in there. It didn't neatly fall within the other 8, but so that's why I put it in there, and I want to make sure everyone agrees that you did make that decision.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
That is correct.
great. So now we're section 16D of the applicable standards. There's 8 of them, and number 8 has a number of subparts because it references a different section of the ordinance. So what's important, well, that's as important is that you articulate some rationale for why you fell into standard was met or not met. And that's what the courts will look at. Obviously, based on what you read in the application or you heard through the testimony, you can point to that, and it's important to have a few sentences at a minute, a sentence or two at a minimum, but your reasons for finding something, and not just a vote. So what I said, so the first one was will maintain safe and healthful conditions. And again, by watching it, I saw there was a vote of 4 to 0 to 1. There was one abstention. The board found that the standard was met for the following reasons, and you didn't have much of a discussion, so this is a chance to have that discussion and add your findings here.
Certainly one key element of that is the proposed installation of a new and larger capacity subsurface wastewater disposal system in terms of not creating a public health threat from improperly disposed wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
Phil, I don't have anything else to add to that, because as we looked at this, it was an after the fact permit approval that we were looking for, correct? So
That's right.
those things that were being proposed, the subsurface wastewater disposal seemed to be in my mind, probably the one focal point that could have been considered either not safe or not helpful if it weren't proposed in a fashion that we could agree with. That would be my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly during the course of, well, certainly in the application itself and all its, attachments, the testimony that we heard, and then also during the site visit, which a subset of us attended, there was no obvious public health or safety threat visible on site. We didn't note that in the notes from the site visit, but its exclusion was sort of the documentation of the fact that there were none. Obvious to us anyway.
Health or safety
Yeah.
concerns based on the site visit, you're saying?
Right.
Okay. And again, what I'm going to do is after this meeting, I'll finalize this and send it back around. It may take one more quick meeting for you just to get on a Zoom and everyone agree and adopt. You can do that, within a week or so, but I want to make sure everyone reads this and agrees with it. And I did say, and that's great. And I did say up above, in the sort of catch-all paragraph, that your findings are based on the materials testimony statements in the record. The intent there was that you would have done that for each of these. So I may not reiterate that under each one. For the above, I'll have some sort of reference based on what you've said tonight, based on evidence in the record. But I just want to point that out, that I also have that overall overarching statement. And that, okay. So is everyone okay with that? Again, you are going to have a chance to read this and review it at your next meeting. Okay. And
Yes.
I think you could have a relatively quick meeting next time. I don't think you have to wait the whole month for this so that the process can move along, but I do think it's important for you to read it and understand it. So tonight we're just adding your findings. So number 2, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters. And again, I saw that it was a 4-0 to 1 vote, what I gleaned. And that you did find it was met with a condition. That was a big part of your decision there. And so I just said with a condition because later on I do list the conditions.
Right.
I'll say with a condition outlined below.
Yeah, because the stormwater, no stormwater plan was submitted, and hence the need for the condition.
Yeah.
But implementation of the stormwater runoff condition, along with the implementation of the soil erosion control plan that has since been submitted, that should reduce or prevent any discharges of pollutants to Long Pond.
Those would be the control measures we'd be looking for in any case, such as this.
Okay. You say prevent any runoff to Long Pond? Is that the
Right, runoff.
Yeah.
And well, I use the word pollutants. I mean, you could be more specific. I mean, typically we're concerned about phosphorus and soil sediment.
Great. Were there any other rationale before I move on to the next one on this one?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Number 3, will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater. And again, that was a 4-0 to 1 vote that it met the standard with a condition related to wastewater. So I think this is a related issue as the one we just talked about, right? But the condition was related to each other. And was there a rationale here other than the condition?
Well, simply that a new wastewater disposal system was proposed and approved by the town's local plumbing inspector.
Which was, if I might just add, that was specific to address the wastewater needs of the accessory structure in question.
Okay. Of I'll call it the project, which is what I had.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. So that the standard was met with the conditions noted below, and because a new wastewater disposal system was approved by the town's plumbing inspector to address the wastewater needs of the project. Okay, number 4. The project will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat. It was a 4-0 to 1 vote again. And do you have a rationale for that?
I think you have to divide it up by split off fish nesting and aquatic life habitat from birds and wildlife.
Okay.
And the first would be that would be protected, or any would be protected as a result of the implementation of the soil erosion control measures required and the prevention of soil sediment reaching potential fish nesting and other aquatic life habitat along the shoreline of Long Pond.
Okay.
And then the only thing I can say about the about bird and wildlife is that You know, nothing indicated to us that there would be a negative impact to either bird life or wildlife.
Okay, great. Impacts to birds, or other wildlife.
The rest of you okay with that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And again, you'll get a chance to read it, so you can all weigh in one last time on it. Okay, great. Number 5. I'm sorry that I'm typing as I go along. I think that's the most efficient way to deal with this. Number 5, we'll conserve shore cover and visual, as well as actual points of access to inland waters. 4-0 to 1 vote again. You found that it was
Um,
met.
So Phil, I'll just take a stab at this by saying that during the project, during the whatever was disclosed to us and what we saw during the on-site visit, did not reveal anything that would have otherwise not met or not or had a negative impact on shore cover, visual, or actual points of access to inland waters. There was nothing observable that would have impacted that.
Mhm.
I would only add that the application, the proposal, did not include any clearing of vegetation between the structure and the lakeshore.
Very, very good point.
Any clearing? Did not include any clearing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Number 6, will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan. And again, 4-0 to 1. I think I gleaned that someone said it was not applicable to the project. So in other words, there were no archaeological or historic resources in the comprehensive plan. So I did fill that one in. Is that correct?
I would go so far as to say that from the information that we have, bless you, that there are no archaeological or historic areas where this project proposes to do something. The comprehensive plan may indicate in other areas of the town, but not where this project is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was not applicable. So it was otherwise not applicable because there was nothing in the record that indicated there were archaeological and historic resources.
Yeah. You have like all of 4 of them or something.
Right. Historic resources impacted by this project. Okay. Number 7, will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use. And again, 4-0 to 1. Based on testimony in the record is what I had at this point, but were there any other? There was a discussion of floodplain at one of your meetings.
Correct.
And it seemed at one point that you were satisfied with the answer, but could you articulate why? Was it that it's not within the floodplain, or that there were, what would be the rationale here?
Well, we had a discussion with Gary Fuller, the code enforcement officer, on that very point. And he was of the opinion that it was not within the floodplain as, on the town map. And we had verified that with going to the most recent FEMA mapping that's available online.
Great. Okay, great. And number 8, finally, but there's some subparts, is in conformance with section 15 land use standards. And you had found that it was met. I didn't have a vote on that one. I can go back and double check. I think it was consistently a 401. I think there was one member that consistently abstained until the very end. So I pulled out, and some of these I think are not going to be applicable, and I use my prerogative to say so, but tell me if I'm incorrect on some of these. So the first one are minimum lot standards. This was, I gleaned this from the application. So you didn't have a lot of discussion about these. So this is where you interrupt, please, or add to where I gleaned from the application or your discussion. The minimum lot per dwelling is 40,000 square feet here, and the existing lot is 53,641 square feet, and thus conforms. The minimum shore frontage is 200 feet, and the existing lot has 123 feet, and thus is legally non-conforming. And I did hear there was a non-conforming lot, legally non-conforming. The principal and accessory structure standard, based on testimony in the record and application material, the structure is set back at least 100 feet from the normal high water line, I gleaned. The lot coverage of 9,312 square feet does not exceed 20% of the lot area within the shoreline zone.
Right.
Again,
During the site visit, we were able to confirm the distance back from the normal high water line, that it was more than 100 feet.
great. Was there anything else to add to the standard? Belgrade. Okay. I may circle back to that one. I'm pulling up the ordinance now, but we can move on. This one is C, campgrounds. Obviously not applicable. You all agree? Yeah.
Correct.
Individual campsites not applicable. Commercial and industrial uses. Now, this was considered you'd already previously determined this was an accessory use to a residential use. Parking areas. That wasn't as clear. I didn't think it was applicable, but I wanted to make sure whether there was anything in the application that implicated this. Let me just, sorry, I didn't have this up on my screen before, but I've got the ordinance now in front of me.
The proposal did include a slight expansion of their parking.
Okay.
And at least I recall some discussion of that expansion was needed just because they expected more vehicles when they had more visitors.
Yes, I agree that that was part of a conversation.
Okay. If you pardon my pause for a moment, I'm just pulling up the actual section 15 standard here just to make sure we've got it completely right.
So you should be around page 33 or 34.
Okay. Here I am.
Okay. And 35.
And I'm just double checking as to make sure that this, yeah, parking areas. Okay. Shall meet the tributary stream setback requirements for the district. adequately sized for the proposed use and designed to prevent stormwater runoff from flowing directly into a water body, retain all runoff, and parking spaces, which aren't necessarily are 10 feet wide and 20 feet long. These are for parking facilities. So what I heard you say, and I'm getting back to the rationale now, is that the application, the project did include a slight enlargement of
Correct.
the existing parking area to accommodate additional vehicles for guests. Was there any, and there was nothing in the application that you saw that would have contributed to runoff or anything like that, as you're saying?
The condition for the stormwater runoff plan includes that area, the expanded parking area, as well as the runoff from the rooftop of the structure.
Great.
Because we would anticipate that there would be more runoff from there.
This project meets the standard with the condition for the stormwater runoff area noted below, which includes the parking area as well as the rooftop. That's great.
Yep.
Roads and driveways. These are construction of roads or driveways. I didn't know if there was anything here. If there was anything part of the project.
I personally don't know
driveway.
how that would be applicable, Phil, because
Okay.
did not propose new roads.
Or driveway.
Okay,
Right.
that's fine. As long as we just note, yeah.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, Mr. Sutton. Yes.
Does the planning board record include the fact that there is a deeded right-of-way across that property and that the right-of-way by record on one of the plans is shown with a center line across the property in question, and it enters the property at a 30-foot width, and the deed includes right-of-way for transit back and forth, as well as the installation of utility lines.
So the question is, does the town record show that?
Yes. The question is, does the planning board record show that discussion?
Oh, show the discussion.
Mr. Chair, I think that would be noted in the minutes.
Thank you, Anthony.
In the recordings. I'm not sure if the utilities were ever mentioned, but certainly the a right-of-way for access.
Utilities are mentioned in the deed.
I meant the discussion that was recorded.
There was a discussion of that, and that to the extent that's a finding the board wants to make, I could put up above, is that there was a, that the property, and I haven't looked in detail at this, but what I'm hearing Mr. Sutton say is that the property includes an easement for access. Is that what I'm hearing? And that
Yes.
you had made that finding. Everyone
Yeah.
agreed that there is some.
Yeah, there was no dispute about that.
Right.
The access to the property is through a.
The finding was made, but there was a specific decision made, I believe, not to show the width of that right-of-way in the planning board's decision.
Okay.
Because there was no width defined. Is that correct? By legal,
The deed is for
There's no
access
deed.
from the Dunn Road to our property line.
Yes, but there's no width in the
It
deed.
enters the Jones property as a 30-foot width. I think it's very reasonable to presume that the 30-foot width would apply continuously across to our property.
Mr. Chairman, have you reopened the public hearing? Because if you're taking more questions and testimony, I have many.
No.
Right, no. So,
Again, the board sent it back to you not to relitigate the issues, but if there are findings you had made, it's appropriate to put them in here. And if one of the findings are, it sounds like they're obviously the subject of the appeal, one of the appeals, and so that's properly before the Board of Appeals. But I think it is appropriate for, if you'd like to, just simply say up above in the findings of fact that one of the findings you found through the testimony was that the property is accessed through an easement. And the fact that there's a dispute about that is something that can be discussed in other venues.
Yeah. No,
But we will. I did add that. I did add the. I
Okay.
just did, and you'll see when you get back that there's now reference to an easement, access easement.
there's no dispute as to the fact that there is a right of way.
right.
Great. Okay, getting back to. So I left off with roads and driveways that is not applicable because there were no roads or driveways included in the project. Signs not applicable. So stormwater runoff, this is something you have addressed, and so it would be good. We need to add a standard, and we need to add some rationale here too for your findings.
Would it be appropriate to do that? Because we had said that through the condition, correct? So.
Yes. We can make reference as we did above, because there were some similar, there's other similar standards above that we've already addressed here.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you're saying this standard was met with the condition outlined below.
Correct.
Based on the evidence in the record. With the condition outlined below. Anything else to add there?
No.
Okay, septic waste disposal systems. This was, I think you said above, there was a new septic. We can say something similar if it is similar, but rationale, but
That would be my thinking, Phil.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, one other question of record, not a new finding. Does the planning board record show that it was questioned or it was noted that the location of the proposed effluent discharge would, by nature of the 100-foot distance between a septic discharge and a well, effectively take a significant portion of the Sutton property off limits for a well and be a taking thereby?
It really doesn't matter. And can I say something right now? If we keep getting interrupted, I'm signing off and there's no quorum.
I'm simply asking whether this record,
It doesn't matter.
whether the record of the planning board shows that this discussion took place.
All right, I'm signing off. There's no more
Wait,
quorum.
Craig, wait a
Hang
second.
on.
No, I'm done with it. We've already heard all the public hearings. We can have no more public hearing. I don't want to hear from anybody but this planning board and this attorney.
And I completely agree with you. Phil, is it not appropriate for the appellants to make their cases before the appeals board as opposed to the planning board at this moment?
yeah, there are issues these are issues for the appeals board. I would note that the findings will, these are the findings of the board. We'll go through this. We're going to go through, there's only a few more. The evidence in the record on any appeal will include not only your findings, but all the submissions, the testimony that was offered, below. The minutes will be included as part of the overall record. So to the extent that there's been issues that have been discussed and hashed, that will be part of the overall record.
And just a warning to everyone, everyone's been told this is not a public hearing. It's not a chance to, if there are questions to be asked, they'll be asked by the planning board. And if anyone pipes in again, I am going to mute all of the microphones so that only I can unmute people.
Great. So I also added, I'm on septic waste disposal. I said, based on evidence record and that the proposed installation of a new and larger capacity subsurface wastewater disposal system and with the condition outlined below, because again, there was a condition related to wastewater. So the next one is essential services. I didn't see that as related. That's a certain type of use that this isn't. Same with mineral extraction and exploration, not applicable. Agriculture, I didn't see that as applicable. Timber harvesting and land management, roads, I didn't see that as applicable. That's a specific type of use. Now, the next two, I do need some help with this on where these fit. There was quite a bit of discussion. In fact, you came back after your last meeting because you got some more information from the applicant on trees. So I just want to make sure I'm articulating this correctly and where these two standards come together. So the first one is the clearing or removal of vegetation for activities other than timber harvesting. That contains a number of standards that an application has to comply with, including a 40% requirement that was alluded to. I did hear that there was a forestry report, a forester's report that was brought back to you, and was read. Portions of it were read by Mr. Cunningham, and at the end of it, the board did vote that the standard was met. And I think it was this standard. I want to make sure it was this one and not the dead trees standard that you were talking. Okay, because I couldn't quite get that.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
It is.
Okay. And so you specifically, there are other standards in here a project has to comply with, but you specifically did spend some time on the 40% requirement, is the way I got it.
Yes.
Based on the report from Steve Forrester, so this is what I wrote, based on a report from Forrester, Steve Pelletier of Stantec, the 4-inch trees that were cut to build the project did not exceed the maximum of 40% allowed and met the other applicable standards. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that? That seemed to be the discussion point around that particular standard, and not any of the other ones in there.
To me, that was.
Okay. There was some discussion about trees that had been cut since the property was purchased over 10 years ago. And I think I heard 2 or 3. I think that gets into the hazard trees, storm damaged trees, and dead tree removal. I think there was a sort of partial discussion about that. I left it, again, you can add some specifics here, but I left it on based on testimony in the Stantec report. This board found that the standard was met. Is there anything else to add to that specifically?
No.
No.
Okay. And did you actually receive a report? I only heard Mr. Cunningham read from it. Was that something submitted into the record?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Q, exemptions to clearing and vegetation removal requirements. It wasn't clear to me whether this was applicable or not. Let me just pull that up. Yeah, these are just not applicable. So it's for removal of vegetation that occurs once every 2 years for maintenance, things like that. And I couldn't tell if this was implicated at all. There was no discussion about this.
There was nothing in the application to that effect either.
Okay. Included any exemptions, and this is otherwise not applicable. So revegetation requirements.
I don't know if it's not applicable or requires some explanation, but because of the forester's report and us determining that particular standard had been met, no revegetation was required.
Mm-hmm.
For tree planting.
Agreed.
Great. erosion and sedimentation control.
Again, requiring the submission of a soil erosion and sedimentation control plan as a condition for the basis was that condition for our submittal to us and our approval.
That was in that was in the condition below.
Correct.
It's number 4, I think.
Which we've received, we just haven't reviewed and approved it yet.
Okay, based on the submission on the condition below, requiring the submission of erosion control plan.
Submission and
Shorelines,
Bill, I'm sorry.
submission. Yeah, I was going to say there's another step there, right? Submission and review
And yeah,
Or-
approval.
And
and
approval.
approval. Okay, great. Shoreline line stabilization. Is there any stabilization issues here?
No.
Soils.
The included in the application materials was a report from a state certified soil site evaluator to the issue of the suitability of the soils for the proposed wastewater treatment plant facility, subsurface disposal system, rather. Excuse me.
Okay, can you just say that one more time? I got half of it, and I can get the
Yeah,
second half.
sorry.
Yeah.
So submitted in the application was a report from a state of Maine certified soil site evaluator, which is the term used in the state plumbing code.
Okay.
And as to the suitability of the soils for a subsurface wastewater disposal system.
Great. Water quality.
If I recall, that's a pretty general standard, both the surface as well as the groundwater. And it seems to me a key there is the protection of both surface water and groundwater as a result of the installation of a new and large capacity septic system. Along with the things we've already mentioned, the soil erosion control and sedimentation plan and the stormwater runoff plan. I miss anything, Peter?
No, I agree on all those counts because that would cover, from my opinion anyway, meeting the water quality standard for both groundwater and surface water.
Okay, great. Historical and archaeological sites. This is duplicative of what we've said above. I don't want to speak for you, but I was going to suggest that we say something similar to something above. So, because you had already said that it was otherwise not applicable because there was nothing in the record that indicated there were archaeological or historic resources impacted by the project.
Correct.
And then finally, resource protection, I just want to double check, but it didn't seem like this was in the resource protection slope district, or was it not?
Correct.
Correct, it's not.
Great. And then the conditions, I took directly from what you did issue last time. You did issue written conditions. And so this is directly from what you had previously issued. So the first one was installation of kitchen appliances. These are conditions of approval. Installation of kitchen appliances and the preparation of meals is prohibited in the proposed structure. And the rationale is it was needed to clarify not approving and clean up this a little bit, is that the board was not approving a second residential unit, and to find that the application meets finding number 8 in the land use standards in section 15A. So you had said previously. Number 2, stormwater runoff from the expanded driveway and proposed structure's roof is to be managed in accordance with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection stormwater management practice outlined in DEP publication Conservation Practices for Homeowners. Such measures shall be in place no later than June 1, 2021. The rationale there was that it was necessary to make positive findings under number 2 and 8 and to ensure proposed project will not result in the pollution of surface water in the form of phosphorus being transported by unmitigated stormwater runoff to Long Pond. Also needed to ensure meet section 15I and V of the land use standards. So up above, we did reference those in I and V. There was a condition.
Phil, if I may ask
Yes.
a question, I don't know if we have the opportunity to, at this point, to tweak any of the language in that.
Yes, I think there is an opportunity here. Yeah.
And I ask because at the time it said driveway.
Yes. Yeah. I was going
really
to bring that up too.
It's the parking area that
Okay.
we're talking about because it was widened at the very end off to the side.
Thank you. That was my next question because we said there was no driveway, but there was parking. So that does clarify that.
Right.
So it's now going to read the stormwater runoff from the expanded parking area and proposed structure's roof. Okay, great. Number 3, use of the proposed structure for human occupancy, including use of the bathroom and laundry, is prohibited until such time as the approved new subsurface sewage disposal system is operating and the building is connected to and using this system. Your rationale was that the condition was needed to find application meets findings number 2, 3, and 8. Proposal will adequately provide for wastewater disposal and to meet sections 15J and V of the land use standards regarding septic disposal and water quality. Testimony before the board indicated that the current septic disposal system alone is inadequate to serve both the existing principal structure and accessory structure proposed in this application and its associated increase in wastewater volume. Okay. And number 4, the applicant shall submit to the planning board for review and approval a written soil erosion and sedimentation control plan by September 15th, 2020, meeting the applicable requirements of section 15S of the Belgrade Shoreline Zoning Ordinance and addressing any existing or potential soil erosion related to the construction of the proposed structure of the expanded parking area. I want to change that. The rationale is that this condition is required to find the application meets findings number 2 and 8. The proposal will prevent soil erosion and protect water quality, as well as the requirements of section 15S of the land use standards. Okay, great. And I may just make a couple like editorial tweaks to this before I send it back to you, but the substance will remain the same. And then finally, the decision based on the above findings of fact and conclusions of law on August 6th, 2020, the Town of Belgrade Planning Board voted by 4-0. Let me just make sure I get that right. Were there 4 members voting or 5 members voting at your last meeting? I think that was confusing to me. The gentleman said he would vote if it was needed or not needed. It was a little confusing on what the abstention, the guy who abstained, did.
Was that Rich Baker, Peter?
I believe it was. Yep.
Wasn't at a meeting until, wasn't he?
Mr. Cunningham's nodding his head no.
Oh, no?
I just can't remember who. I mean, you did a roll call.
And my notes show that Rich voted on all those roll calls.
So it might have been.
I'll go back and just watch that final vote. I'll make sure this vote call is correct. I just did, yeah.
Peter, can I say something?
Mac, is that you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So just related to the votes, I don't know how you want to manage the document, but there's been a change in personnel on the planning board. And so, you know, throughout the document, you list how the votes were, 4-1, 4-0, that kind of thing. But that one person left, and I'm a new member, and so I'm not going to vote tonight.
Right.
And so
Correct.
you can't just say the votes tonight are the same as the votes in August and in previous meetings.
And
because
we're not,
different
Mac.
membership.
Yeah, no,
Right.
we won't do that. So this is memorializing what occurred on August 6th.
Correct.
So when the board actually approved the application, that's what this is doing. I'll go back and double check the vote counts or look through the minutes before this. Again, I'm going to send this back one more time. So this isn't the final. You're going to see what I did tonight. So we'll get that clean. Make sure that that's clarified. Okay. So anyway, by a vote of the application of the shoreline permit application, there's a double word there. The shoreline permit application of Jody C. Jones and Stephen C. Jones with the above conditions. And at a meeting October 1, developed. I'm gonna have you guys do one more meeting. I think it's appropriate. I want to make sure everyone really understands what we're doing, so that's not a question above. So I'm going to say developed these written findings of fact and conclusions of law and remand from the Board of Appeals, and adopted these findings on blank date 2020. So that's when you actually vote to adopt these, okay? Belgrade Planning Board. And I just have it, the chair can sign on behalf of everyone if everyone agrees to that after you vote to adopt it. So we went through the whole thing pretty efficiently. Was there anything else? Again, you will have another opportunity to review and tweak this when you get back together. But I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else anyone wanted to say based on this report.
Just a question on my part.
Yeah.
What's the clock on this? I assume there's some time frame in which we have to respond to the Board of Appeals. So it relates to, do we need to have this on our agenda for the next meeting?
Yes, you should. Well, you should move this along in the for everyone's sake. This is it won't take long for you to review this based on what we did tonight, but I would just have everyone read it similar, as if you were reading minutes, to make sure that it's accurately reflects your findings, what we discussed tonight. Just put it on your next meeting. There was no time frame in the board's order to do this. It was just simply remanded, but I would just recommend moving it along for everyone's sake, as quickly as possible in the normal course of your meetings. You could even have a special meeting if you wanted, just for the purpose of adopting these findings, if you wanted to even move it along faster. But the next step, once you adopt these will be sent back to the Board of Appeals, and then they will start their process. I want to speak out of turn here, but I believe what they did was they essentially held jurisdiction. So there's not an additional appeal that needs to be filed by anyone. It's just going to go back to them. But the parties do have an opportunity to file additional statements within 30 days after they receive your findings. That's how the process is going to work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we'll
Great.
just
Anything else?
get this on the agenda for our next meeting.
Yep. And then you can, assuming that you're okay with it and you adopt it, it can be transmitted to the Board of Appeals and the necessary parties the next day. So, great. Anything else from anyone?
I would just ask Anthony, is there anything else that in your mind about either our process or involvement with Phil at this time?
No, I think Phil very succinctly laid out what the timeline is going to be, and I completely agree. Hopefully, this can be a 2-minute item at the top of your next agenda, which, by the way, Phil, will be 2 weeks from tonight, so on the October the 15th. And as he said, the following day, once you execute it, Peter, and I can send that to you through DocuSign, I will forward that to the appeals board chair and the attorney who's assisting the appeals board in this matter.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Well, great. It's good to see all you live and not just on a recording in your faces. And say hi to Becky. We miss her at the Roma meetings. So,
Yeah.
okay. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Okay, next up. Okay, according to our agenda, and welcome Mac and Rich. I see Adam has joined us.
Yeah, and Peter, as you and the rest of the board know, another of the town's attorneys, Mike Hodgins, is going to be joining us for this discussion. I've texted him and he says he is logging on right now.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe while we're waiting for him, Peter, maybe this would be an opportune time for me to talk to the board about their docket.
Yeah, please do.
So through no fault of your own, because you guys were slowed down by COVID, and the Jones case, I think, has been more prolonged than we might have imagined. And and you're working on the subdivision rewrite. We've got a pretty sizable backlog of permit applications right now. And so I don't want you guys to make a decision tonight, but I do think it's something that we need to discuss. So I do want you to start thinking about it at your next meeting, about how we might be able to work our way through that backlog of permit applications, so that we can get some of those taken care of, and folks like Adam Gardner can get to work on some of the renovations and all that they have planned in the shoreland zone. So just think about that. I think a couple options might be just to have some special meetings, and maybe one of those special meetings is just an hour-long meeting just to work with Nick from KV Cog on the subdivision ordinance. I cringe to mention this, but another option would be to spend a Saturday working through some of those permit applications. But think about that, how you might propose that we tackle that and start getting some of those permits adjudicated. So, and without further ado, our attorney, Mike Hodgins, who I think many of you guys are familiar with, has joined us, and he, at my request, issued a legal opinion on this application in the shoreland zone, and regarding your discussion at the last meeting. So Peter, I don't know how else you want to tee that up.
So that's probably about it. So the next item on the agenda is the commercial application. This is for GPM Properties, Adam and Stephanie Gardner on Main Street, where the purpose of it was to add second floor to existing building for retail space. I think this is where we go to our Mike Hodgkins for your input. So, Mike, thank you for joining us today. What have you with us?
Hi there, all. Well, and did I assume Anthony shared the memo that I sent to you folks?
I did, Mike. I shared it with the planning board and with the applicant as well.
Okay. And so I'm open to any questions. I know it's this is one of those interesting situations, and it's unique in that we're talking about adding commercial uses to an existing commercial use. But as I explained in the memo, I think if this were in the shoreland zone only and that was the only question, there may be some questions that you'd have to get to in terms of what's a principal use and what's not, and you can talk about that. But as I think George Seal pointed out, and actually, frankly, back in the Brightside case, which I think you all know that I was involved in, the court was pretty clear, and we had explained during that process that the minimum lot size ordinance applies because it overlaps with both. And as I said in the memo, really the minimum lot size ordinance really is pretty clear that even if it is multiple occurrences of the same type of use, meaning a commercial use, anytime there are multiple occurrences, the lot needs to meet the dimensional standards for all, and it's really multiplied. And where this is an undersized lot to begin with, it's already a problem. So those are my concerns. I know you've had some meetings on this, so you've got some more information. Could be that I didn't have all of the information, but those were the issues that I really saw that were making this kind of problematic.
Mike, is it fair to say, and this was a term that was used in the Brightside case, that this is a non-conforming lot? To add additional commercial uses would make it even more non-conforming?
It is. And again, I think, the distinction here, so it's a little bit different than Brightside. I mean, but you're right. And I kind of raised those same points in the memo. In Brightside, it was going from residential to commercial, which made it more non-conforming because the requirements were more stringent. But again, as I said in the memo, what this really was what Brightside was at the start when they tried to add the marina to a residential use, and you really had to multiply the dimensional standards. And that makes it just really difficult in terms of a non-conforming lot, because it's just, not only is it more non-conforming, it just can't possibly conform to the dimensional requirements if you're going to start multiplying those by 2 or possibly 3.
So you have to multiply them by 2 or 3 if they're not the principal commercial. I mean, so what was you talking about being not the principal commercial activity?
So again, with respect to the shoreland zoning ordinance, it talks about principal uses, and you could certainly have some discussion around that. So you can have more than one principal use, and as I understand it, the current use is boat storage, and the retail would be a second principal use, unless you said that it was entirely incidental and accessory to the boat storage, and I'm not sure what the uses are exactly, but I do think that the shorter answer, you might say, is to look at the minimum lot size ordinance, which says more than one occurrence of the same land use. So anytime you have multiple occurrences of commercial uses, the minimum lot size ordinance says you have to multiply the dimensional standard. So if you need 60,000 square feet for a commercial use and you have multiple commercial uses, you then have to have 120. And this lot has, I think, 27,000 or so, 25,000. So you start bumping up. It's fine as it is right now, but when you start multiplying it, you're just way beyond what the lot can sustain.
I do have a comment on that goes kind of along with Craig's, is that it'd be an accessory business that's in there, but if you can call every separate one a principal business, then let's go back when we had the MLSO, and they did the MRC building that has 3 uses in it. And that was a residential lot that was approved to put in a commercial property. So it doesn't have the square footage, doesn't have the road frontage, doesn't have the water frontage. And the town gave them a permit to put that in there. We have 3 uses in that particular building. Not to go on to another one would be like the post office. It has the post office and has part of the MRC in there. Originally, it was only Days Marina. It was a single use. I mean, most of the ones in the village have more than one use. And this piece of property has the 2nd largest land in the village. I have the list of 12 different businesses in the village, and every single one has more than one. I mean, some have residential and some have commercial. I mean, 2 years ago, they gave the commercial and residential at the for the new antique shop at 56 Main Street, and that's the biggest lot at 1.72 acres. It still doesn't meet your multiplication. So there's plenty of places in the village that the planning board has ruled on in the past that don't meet this requirement.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, and I think I explained this to Mr. Gardner at the time. As you all know, I've only been here a year. I can't speak to anything that's happened in the past, but I do think it is critical that we have an ordinance, and we have to enforce the ordinance and do what the ordinance says. And in this case, I think our attorney has given us some sound advice that we already have a lot that, if that business tried to locate on that lot today, it wouldn't happen. It's grandfathered from the minimum lot size ordinance. The ordinance, to borrow a term in the political game these days, it is what it is. And if it were, if people think it needs to be something different, well, then, there are processes for changing the ordinance, but we have to apply the ordinance as it currently exists. And
but you haven't. That's the problem.
I'm not, Adam, I'm not speaking to what has happened in the past. If mistakes have happened in the past, and I'm not allowing that because we don't have all the details of all the places that you're talking about in front of us. It could be that there may be reasons why at the time maybe there wasn't a minimum lot size ordinance.
There was.
Some of those. When I'm just saying, as a for instance. But if mistakes were made in the past, that is not a reason for making them today.
But there's other ones that are in the village that we had this conversation 2 meetings ago that never even went for a commercial permit, and they're still sitting there today. It's the same thing as if you go by, I've had a lot of people look this over, and if you go by the history of how the planning board and the town has approved certain things, like I said, the MRC, the post office.
Mr. Gardner, we're here tonight to talk about your application. And your application, according to our
those other ones are
required standard
to meet a square footage. And this is be an accessory business. We're not required to meet that square footage. It's not a principal structure. We're talking a small percentage of the exact
and that's an argument, but that's an argument that could be made using the shoreline zoning ordinance. And that's what Mr. Hodges just said. If we were applying the shoreline zoning ordinance, there might be some question as to what the interpretation is. But when you apply the minimum lot size ordinance, there is no interpretation. Anytime you add another use, regardless, even if it's another commercial use, you have to increase the size of the lot.
But it also, pretty sure it says in the minimum lot size ordinance, you can't use on the minimum lot size, it says right in, no authorization shall be found and no permit shall be granted, which question be or denied under this ordinance for any construction or land use within the boundary of the shoreline zone. So we'll be back to the shoreline zone ordinance, not the minimum lot size.
Well, I'm not sure where you're reading from, but I think
it would be page 2. Page 2, section B, number 2 in the very bottom.
Page 2, section B2.
B, yeah, B, number 2, last 3 lines.
So again, I think from the Brightside case, I think that section is not applicable to this situation. And so again, that just talks about when you've got overlap between the two. But
There is overlap between the two because part of this piece is
the
in shoreline zone,
interpretation
part
is
of it's
that
not.
the minimum lot size ordinance applies to every lot within the town. And again, the language is a little bit different in the minimum lot size ordinance. I think as Anthony said, if someone wanted to change that language so that it didn't say every occurrence requires a multiplication of the dimensional standards, that could be changed. But I think the problem right now is that's how it reads. And others, and by the way, the planning board members might read it differently. But that's sort of the clear language of the ordinance. So I don't know how you get around it. Again, if others made different arguments in the past, I suppose, or didn't make arguments, that's kind of neither here nor there. Right now, we're looking at the ordinance, and again, if it changes, the board could apply a different standard. So I don't know, and there's certainly folks here who've been on the board for quite a long time, so maybe there's another interpretation.
I believe the argument is that the MLRC, when they did it, they said it was all standard one use, which originally was residential and going commercial. It's in a commercial lot. It's been commercial lot for over 100 years. So it's an accessory business to this structure that's already existing. So the principal one would get thrown out, so it wouldn't need to meet the requirement for the use. It'd be considered another use.
So Adam, so I'm hearing what you're saying about that other structure, and I think what you're talking about is you bring up is if it was fair for them, you're asking for fairness for you in terms of allowing this other thing. Is that correct?
Well, I'm looking for the board to, typically you rely on how you voted in the past, or your actions for, say, giving a permit for tearing down a camp and rebuilding it. You got to move it back X amount of feet. Every time that's the same. You kind of look back on those same kind of thing. If you look back, the commercial stuff in the village, I don't think there's only one lot in the village is actually over 60,000 square feet. So everything in the village except for one is non-conforming. And if you look back and everything that's been done over the time, they've approved all of these ones when land use was in effect. Whether they looked at it or not, it's not what we're here for. I get it. But they've all been in there. If you look at all these buildings, they have 2 or 3 different businesses in there. So are they all considered accessory businesses? Well, they must be, because otherwise it'll all be, illegal not be able to put in the last 5 years. I mean, we're not talking 20, 30 years. We're talking a couple years. And the MRC was 10 years ago, I think. Right. And this was in effect at that point. And there's been other businesses in the last 3 years that have come in there and taken buildings and added multiple businesses too.
Yep. So I would just offer this, Adam, that you are right that we look at previous decisions that have been made, but the most important thing is looking at the ordinances that we have in place at the time of decision. So that's really where our focus would be. That is in the best interest of the town, and it's the best interest of each of the taxpayers in the town.
Why aren't they looked at for every single permit or any commercial place that goes into the village, that some of them should not be there? Just too many uses. They just put them in there and done what they wanted to do, and now we're going about this the right way to add an accessory business to the marina.
I don't know how to answer how all decisions were made in the past. I know the board does their best. So I would say at this time, we need to really focus on your application with the ordinances that we have in place. George.
I'm sympathetic to Adam's argument for consistency, but to be inconsistent in this case with the state Supreme Court decision on Brightside doesn't seem to be a step in the right direction. I frankly, most of the examples that Adam cited, I'm not familiar with the exception of the place next to Sunset Grill. But And I think Anthony kind of hit the nail on the head where, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. There may be, and this may be an issue of enforcement as well as the planning board's role in consistent decisions over the decades. I don't know.
I mean,
But
pretty much.
I don't think it's to the town's best interest for us to make an error here to correct errors of the decades past.
Correct.
Right, I completely understand, but it's one of those, it's, you know, you have, you know, the MRC, the post office, you got the Belgrade Inn that has the cafeteria that's out front, you got the 1830s house that has residents and commercial, you have Hello Goodbye that has 3 businesses in it, you got Dockside that has 3 businesses in it, you got Lakeland Group that has 2 businesses in it, which last 2 meetings ago, there's no permits whatsoever for that. 3 retail shops in the old antique building. You have the antique one that has a residential as well. And then, you know, it just keeps going on. There's more of it. So it's really hard for me to sit here and say, okay, well, 2 wrongs don't make it right. I completely understand. But, you know, I'm asking for, you know, the town must deem all these as accessory businesses because otherwise half of them can't, or more than half of them can't be there. And they're all recent. So what I'm looking at is this would be an accessory business, not a principal structure that I'm putting up. I'm not building a structure. I'm putting in a floor in the air, in the existing airspace. You know, we're not touching really any of the storage, other than we're taking airspace and making it retail shop.
So I think I hear what you're saying, Adam, on that. I'd like to go back to Mike Hodgkins to talk about that, because if Mike, could you help us with this? If we're talking accessory structure or accessory business, I think your opinion was that the minimum lot size thing still kicked in. You'd have to increase or multiply something. Is that, am I summarizing correctly?
Yeah, you know, and kind of throw out an example because I mean, I struggle with this too in some respects. So, for example, the 2 retail uses might be similar uses. If you have a strip mall that has 3 different businesses, but they're all retail, to me, that's all one retail use, even though you might have 3 stores. But here's part of the problem with even talking about accessory. Accessory is the definition that applies for the shoreline zoning ordinance. And what really kind of becomes the problem, you could argue that a restaurant might have a takeout window in the shoreline zone. So the takeout window is accessory to the sit-down restaurant, for example. Okay, but the problem is under the minimum lot size ordinance, it's pretty specific. And it says more than 1 occurrence of the same land use shall be permitted as long as the dimensional characteristics exceed the sum for the individual dimensional requirements. So every time, according to that, every time there's another occurrence of the same retail use, the same commercial use, it becomes a multiplication. And again, I'm not, you know, unsympathetic to Adam at all and what people are trying to do and what it looks like downtown. But what I'm saying is under the existing ordinance, that appears to be a problem to me to keep adding businesses to a lot that's undersized based on that language alone.
And to be fair, I asked the exact same question of Mike that Adam just raised. Well, does it make a difference if the building is going up versus out? And the ordinance does not address that. It doesn't make an allowance for expanding upward versus outward.
And actually on that, Anthony, thanks. Just to be clear, I mean, this comes up all the time, came up in Brightside, but it comes up in a lot. It's not the structure we're talking about. The reason it's the use. They're 2 different things. So it's a conforming structure as far as I know. I don't know what the setbacks are and size, but the structure itself is probably conforming. It's the use under the ordinance is not conforming because the use, there isn't enough area for that use.
But we're adding a use to it. We're not changing a use.
Right. And that's why it's different than the Brightside case where it was changing from residential to commercial. So that was a change of use. But The problem is you're adding a use, and the ordinance, the minimum lot size ordinance says every time you add the same kind of use, you have to increase the dimensional standards.
Like I said, it goes right back down to, go for a walk through the village. And I mean, anyone who's been here 10 years will know exactly what's been added. And by what you're saying is that having 3 retail shops next to each other would require 180,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think arguably, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously everyone here, it's not like everyone's anti-business. Everyone wants to see shops in the village. That's what it's there. It's limited commercial. That's the idea, is to have shops there. There's been shops there, been, hundreds of years. I mean, this piece of property originally, was a drive-in, like a movie theater called the Casino. They went to a gas station, and when they built this building, I pulled the old permits. It was for storage, but it was built for a second floor for retail space when it was constructed back in '88. So obviously there's an issue with all the minimum lot size for the village because the town's issued all of these permits, or lack thereof, for all these structures in there, and there's not a single one other than maybe the Village Inn and Days Store would be the only 2 that meet this requirement. But everything else has been there in the last 10 years. I'm pretty sure this ordinance has been in since like 93, updated a couple times. Yeah, 93, updated 95, 96, and 2010.
Yep.
So I'm really confused on why we're just starting to enforce this now, where we're adding, I'm not building another structure. I'm taking a little bit of space and using it for retail shop that I would deem as an accessory business to like the marina, because it's going to be home goods and stuff for the cabins, cottages, boats, stuff like that. So it's not that far off what's already existing there.
Adam, you just said it yourself. Why are you enforcing this now? We're enforcing it because that's what we're charged with doing.
Right, but if you go back to like when Peter and I were just talking, that you go back 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, however you want to cut it, that if you go on how the board is voted, we can pull all those, and we can come back and revisit all these and say, okay, here's how the board voted all these times, and now we're going to change and vote something different. Well, the only other option is we look at rezoning the entire village district, which is supposed to be limited commercial, and make it so it works for everybody. Because what we're all coming to a conclusion now is there's a lot of businesses there that have been allowed to go in that should not be there.
I think the focus really is with awareness. What our ordinance says now, we're trying to apply it as fairly as we can with what we know in this instance. And that's what it comes down to.
The ordinance hasn't changed. It's not like it just came out, last year.
No, sir, the ordinance hasn't changed, but the membership of this board and the town's administration have.
The board's been the same for a while. I mean, I've been going to the board since 2008, and there's still a handful of people on there that, I've probably been to more meetings than most, fortunately or unfortunately. But there's some people that, have been on there for quite a long time. Granted, Anthony, you're new to the town. I get it, and you're doing a great job. Just frustrated because we're trying to bring a business to the town that if you look in the last couple of years, what's been added to the town, how many businesses have been added, what I'm seeing now is like, well, maybe they weren't supposed to be there.
I understand your frustration, but as George rightly said, we can't compound mistakes by making more mistakes. If in fact mistakes have been made.
By what the attorney's saying, it sounds like there are. So how do we go about getting this all fixed? Do we need to amend the minimum lot size for a village district?
That's always a citizen's prerogative.
Yeah, I mean, just nobody asked me really to comment, but Adam kind of did. I mean, the shoreline zoning ordinance has some requirements because the state mandates certain things. So I'm not going to try to get into what's permissible there. We could amend it. The minimum lot size ordinance could be amended by the town. If this becomes a problem, It could be amended so that it makes sense for what you see now. But I'll just reinforce what others are saying. And again, this has obviously come to the attention of people in the last year or so because of other cases and that sort of thing. For whatever reason, maybe this wasn't focused on, permits were granted, but it's kind of like any court. Courts can reverse themselves as times change, interpretation changes. And I hate to say so, it's just there's this focus on non-conforming lots right now. And to me, and again, I could be wrong, but the clear language of this section seems to say you've got to multiply every time you add another use. That could be changed, but as it stands right now, it's kind of a tough sell to interpret it any way other than what it says.
Right, that's for the principal use. We're talking an accessory use for, it doesn't make any difference that we're out of because we're technically in the shoreline zone. So I think that would supersede the minimum lot size.
No, it doesn't, I don't believe. So we're talking about the minimum lot size ordinance, which applies everywhere in town. So it still says more than one occurrence of the same use. So it is not, I don't think we have to get into the accessory discussion.
So it would be if it's an accessory business, it wouldn't have to meet it. If it's another annex of the actual holding of the marina building.
So,
Again, go ahead.
Peter, can I just say something?
You may, Mac.
So, Adam, you know how I voted last week. You know what I said last week. It's
Yep.
clear that I think that in terms of, is this a more non-conforming use? No, I don't think so, right? I think what we should be focusing on, is it more non-conforming in terms of, does it do more damage to the lake water quality? Because that's the whole point when you're 10 feet from the lake, right? But as it's been stated multiple times, there's already state approved paved entrances. The building isn't changes. So I totally understand your frustration, but it's been pointed out clearly here that legally that's not where we are right now. So I think definitely the method for modification is that we can't approve this right now, but we can change the minimum lot size ordinance and the shoreline zoning ordinance and any other, the comprehensive plan, whatever else we need to change for the village, because given this legal interpretation, I think it's silly, because the village is where development should go, and right now it can't if we interpret it this way, but clearly we have to interpret it this way. So I totally understand your frustration. I'm very much willing to work with you if you're interested. If you're not, I'm very much willing as a planning board member to make a priority modification of these ordinances as soon as we get through, the existing, whatever, 10, 15 applications we have right now. But definitely that is the route we have to go. And I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I am, because of how I voted last time and what I'm saying, but it just doesn't make any sense to continue this conversation. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
No, I agree. So let's just table it, and we'll come back and we'll revisit it when, like I said, I'd definitely work on either amending the ordinance to get it changed, because obviously it's not correct. And I believe it's about 12 properties, so about 30 businesses that would probably be on board. So let's just table it, and I will come back to the planning board and readdress it.
Okay. So Adam, thanks for your consideration. And so I'm hearing you loud and clear that you'd like to table this commercial application.
For now, yeah, I'll get back to you on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mike Hodge. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
Hodgins, yeah.
I apologize. I was struggling with that. So,
That's
Mike,
fine.
thank you so much for your opinion and for your time to attend this evening. I really appreciate it greatly.
I have a question for Mike, actually, before he signs off.
Go ahead.
So Mike, so if the minimum lot size ordinance was adjusted so that it wouldn't have to be multiplied and it was an existing business, would the shoreline zoning ordinance still be standing in the way in the village?
So I think yes. We could look at it some more. We have to, if it was purely accessory, if the use was purely accessory, I think we might get around it. If you're talking about this application.
Yes. Well, yeah. For now, yes.
So it depends on what the amendment is, I guess.
On what, the minimum lot size? Or the shore?
Yes.
Yes. So what would we have to adjust in the shoreline zone to make sure that the village is, because otherwise we're promoting sprawl. If we can't do anything in the village, where the focus of Belgrade Lakes Village is the village, there should be able to be businesses going into this as deemed limited business. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be having businesses in the village. So what is standing in our way in the shoreline zoning?
Well, so the shoreline zoning, I mean, we have separate standards. And again, the one of the reasons I'm hesitating too is that there are minimum standards in the state minimum standard shoreline zoning. So we can only change that so much. But I can say again that here, the minimum lot size ordinance in Belgrade is actually more restrictive. So that's the biggest problem for Adam right now. And for anyone. But for example, in the shoreline zone, if we cannot, and I think we probably cannot change the dimensional standards for a commercial use or a residential use, then we're still going to be stuck with whatever those minimums are.
Okay. George.
Just to wrap up where I'm coming from, I certainly would be amenable to having a comprehensive discussion about what changes are needed in town ordinances as well as the comprehensive plan when we redo that for Belgrade Lakes Village and possibly even other parts of town like North Belgrade. But I would just want to make sure that, one, we get plenty of public input from people in the village as well as elsewhere, and we consider issues that we haven't discussed. For example, in the village, it's been on the priority waiting list for a wastewater treatment plant for decades, and the only way we're going to be able to allow safely to very dense development down there is with that kind of infrastructure as part of the solution. As you all know, there's a number of holding tanks down there. There've been a number of well contamination cases. You can't separate the wastewater disposal issue from greater, denser development down in that what is essentially a peninsula.
Thank you, George. Some excellent points. And I too would want to make sure I offer up my my services to participate in modifying minimum lot size ordinance. I get your points, that's for sure. Craig, you nailed it, I think, and Adam, you brought up some good points about this whole thing. I apologize. My phone is ringing in the background. Stand by.
Actually, I'll add one thing maybe while Peter's taking a break, because I actually want to go back to Craig's question. And one of the things that you might look at for future use as you're talking about this, again, the minimum lot size ordinance says it's section 3A, says it applies to all land area within the town of Belgrade. And that, your point is good, that what applies in the outer parts of the town of Belgrade for lot size requirements might be very different than what you need in the downtown area. And that might be something that you start to take a look at in terms of within that area, what are the size requirements for lots, what are setbacks and that sort of thing, because you're talking about this, you're talking about a very different neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Adam, really, thank you for your time and efforts. I know you put a lot of thought into this, and I know you had a lot of hopes and expectations. So after hearing all this, we hear you about what you've said, and hear you tonight about tabling the application for now. So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to probably move on to the next agenda item. Are we okay?
Do we need a vote or?
Yeah, I was going to suggest a
Thank you.
formal motion and vote.
Yep.
Peter.
Great point. Thank you. I didn't want to skip process, but I started to. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to table the application at this point in time.
A second.
Motion on the floor and seconded. Any more discussion? No? Okay. So we can vote. So I'll do a roll call vote. So from my left to right, I first see George.
Yes.
Going down the line, Mac.
Yes.
Craig was here. Where the heck did I?
He's there.
He's off that way, that way.
Okay, stand by. Rich, you're here.
Yes.
Yes, and stand by. He may have stepped away for a minute. I don't.
No, he's there.
He is? There he, oh, geez, okay. Craig,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I went right by you.
You got to wear a funny hat, Craig, sir. You stand right out.
All right. And I vote yes. So that would be what, 5 full yeses? Right. And none opposed. All right. Thanks. That has been tabled. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I will leave now unless you think you need me for something else.
Thank you, Mike. No, you can stop charging us now.
Oh, you always say that. Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I muted myself because we received another phone call, but my wife got the phone, so. All right, next up. Let's see, on our agenda, the next item is the new subdivision application. And I think I saw Tyler had dialed in, is that correct?
Yeah, he's here.
Yes.
Great. Hi, Tyler. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys.
Okay.
So yes, I am proposing a 10-lot subdivision on a section of a larger parcel that I own off the Dunn Road. Understand this is a dynamic time with the moratorium going to vote and the ordinance being updated as we speak. I just need to determine if this is a go now to be in a position to build houses next summer, or if I need to postpone this and develop elsewhere until a later time. So I provided a rough sketch. I've got full sets that K&K Land Surveying has done. But I understand the sketch review is more of a Q&A and schedule a site visit to meet with all of you folks out on site.
Tyler, thanks. So to start off, for everybody's benefit, what you're proposing is a 10-lot subdivision, correct?
Correct.
So that would fall under, in our subdivision, in our current subdivision ordinance, that would be called a major subdivision, correct?
Correct.
And I suspect you've probably met several times, or at least once, with Gary to go over some of these things. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, pardon me. I'm just trying to make sure we don't miss anything. Just trying to get through it, that's all.
Peter, just a point of clarification. Is this a pre-application or a preliminary application? Just to be clear.
Yeah.
This is a pre-application.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So in a pre-application meeting, this, right, George, we don't do these that often, so we kind of divide up into two things, right?
Yeah. I mean, this, I think Tyler stated it well in terms of this is an opportunity for us to ask questions, provide him with guidance as to any issues that we might see at this point in time, schedule a site visit if we should choose to do so. So, you know, I think a large part of it, though, is to raise issues that, you know, that he can think about and address when he submits the preliminary application.
Okay. All right.
And an opportunity for him to ask us questions, very importantly.
Yeah, very important. Since this is not a preliminary plan, it's just a, what do we call this? A pre-application meeting, correct? This is what we're doing. So,
Yeah, I have submitted the application after discussing it with Gary, but this sketch plan is, as George said, a Q&A. The next step will be the preliminary, which requires pretty significant investment on my part with the engineer and the surveyor.
right.
So that is in motion. We're working on that, but as a formality, this has to come first. And with the moratorium coming, this is something I'd hoped to do this winter, late fall, as soon as the ordinance was updated. But because of COVID, that's all been delayed. I'm talking with Anthony and Gary after getting wind that subdivisions were included in that moratorium. I just wanted to make sure that I could get in front of you guys to start this process, assuming we can proceed through the fall and winter months. So I'm in a position to have final plan this winter and start developing in 2021.
Gotcha. George, or any other board member, Rich, Mac, Craig, are there any specific items based on what you've seen so far within what has been presented to us that we would bring to Tyler for his consideration? That would be a point of concern. I can think of kind of one that might jump. George, I see.
Yeah, I have a process question because I don't want us to be misleading Tyler, and this is for you, Anthony, and for Gary. And it's the question of the applicability of the moratorium should it pass. There's language in the ordinance that's pretty specific on when do you get rights vested in the course of getting your subdivision approved. And it cites the same part of the statute as the applicability section of the moratorium. I find it fascinating that it's a piece of law from the 1870s of all times. But anyway, if you go to the pre-application section on page 11, it says rights not vested just on the basis of submittal of a pre-application. And so, but I'm not quite sure how this interrelates with the moratorium language.
So the intent of the moratorium is to put a hold on the acceptance of applications. So if we receive an application on November 2nd or even November 3rd, because even if it passes, it will not have taken effect until the voters have passed it, which will be November 4th. And anything that we accept up until that point, we just treat as we normally would. And assuming that the moratorium ordinance passes on November 3rd, beginning November 4th, we will no longer be accepting applications for 180 days.
So Anthony, so my question would be, and maybe this is in line with what George is asking. I'm just asking for clarification. So right now we're in a pre-app phase. Would that be, is that basically in the hopper? If something's in a pre-app phase?
Well, I think Tyler, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, but didn't you just say you have now submitted an application?
Correct.
Oh.
I don't think it was required to initiate this pre-application meeting, but when discussing it with Gary, I submitted the full application in addition to what was required for this sketch plan.
Okay.
And Gary has that?
Yes.
Okay. Because what we have is not the preliminary application, I don't believe.
George, I do have that, and I thought Nick sent you a copy. Tyler submitted an application and also the sketch for a sketch. This was supposed to be a sketch plan review tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got the application.
I just want to make sure that we're not misleading Tyler here, and if he needs to submit his preliminary application, not his pre-application, but his preliminary application before whenever the voter, November 4th, I want to make sure he knows that.
Right.
He submitted the subdivision application that we handed him at the town office to fill out and bring back with the sketch plan.
I believe I'm looking at it. It says Town of Belgrade subdivision application.
Yep.
Subdivision name Cedar Mill Ridge, applicant, Evans Development, LLC.
There is no second application for the preliminary plan, in my understanding. This is it.
Okay. Well, that's why I asked my question earlier on, what's before us today? Is it a pre-application or a preliminary application?
No, I appreciate that because that does seem a bit ambiguous, but
Right.
Okay.
my understanding, the only application that is required has been submitted.
Okay, so that means
so if
you got vested rights at this point.
That's how I understand it.
About that.
Right. But it sounds like the purpose of so that's great because that means it's in the hopper. So that means if there's a moratorium that's passed based on a conversation with Anthony, that if it's already in the hopper, then if a moratorium were to pass, it would not apply to this one, right?
And I apologize for this question, Tyler, but because it doesn't have anything to do with you, but Gary's informed me that, we have a 250 unit condo development out there, and I'm sure they're going to try to beat the clock. And so this has got ramifications.
Yeah, and just so you know, George, we were misinformed that that application has actually been submitted and it's 15 units, not 250.
Oh,
Correct.
a slight difference.
Stop making Tyler jealous.
Well, you don't want that getting out, man. You all run out of town tarred and feathered.
I know, really. Jeez, I'm only off by a factor of like 15. All right. All right, so great. So then the purpose of our discussion tonight is really from a pre-app perspective, which is basically Tyler's consulting with us to look at this thing. So
A sketch drawing, right?
Sketch drawing.
It's a pre-app or sketch drawing. Sketch drawing is the first part of the preliminary, correct?
We got to be considering this a preliminary application if we're going to give him vested rights.
Right, so sketch drawings, isn't the sketch drawing the first part of the preliminary?
No, it's the pre-application. At the preliminary thing, we're already getting a more detailed survey and we're getting a whole lot of other information that we don't have yet, like test pit analyses and
Notifying all the abutters. And there's quite a bit in just that next step.
I mean, we certainly have the application completed, the form. We have an I mean, obviously Tyler's done a survey. It may, admittedly, you know, we get these in the 8.5 by 11 format. And so sometimes we miss, at least speaking for myself, I miss details on it. So there may be soil test pits on here that I just didn't see, but.
No, there isn't yet. No.
Yeah, so, you know, if we're going to give Tyler vested rights, we got to be saying that this is a preliminary application.
Well, there's never, Tyler didn't intend this to be a preliminary application. This is a sketch plan. So and it's, the sketch plan is everything the sketch plan is supposed to be. So that's what it is. I don't think there's any question.
Correct. Right. In my discussion with Gary and Anthony, that's getting that application in, sort of grandfathers or puts it in the hopper to avoid any future moratorium.
Well, I hate to repeat myself, but just having a pre-application in according to the ordinance, and I'll read the ordinance, the submittal or review of a pre-application sketch plan shall not be considered the initiation of the review process for the purposes of bringing the plan under protection of Title I MRCA 302. And that's the same section of law that's cited in the applicability section of the moratorium.
And maybe I'm missing something, but so Tyler, since you have submitted this sketch plan, you have since submitted the application, correct?
I did it all as one.
Oh,
when I submitted this to Gary, he said, fill out this application. And I went to the town office and got it because it wasn't online. And I did all this as quick as I could after learning of the subdivision being included in there. So there's no way there's enough time to get everything that the preliminary plan entails. I mean, it's you have 6 months after the on-site inspection and sketch board to submit preliminary plan. I don't think it's anything that someone expects to be done in a 14-day period, or I guess it'd have to be 14 days to get back to you guys before the vote.
Anthony, I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think you may be confused.
I may be.
There's no separate sketch plan application.
Okay.
So the difference between a sketch plan pre-application and a pre-application or a preliminary application is just in the materials that are required to be submitted. So he only submitted minimum materials equivalent to a sketch plan.
Which I have to do before going forward with the preliminary plan.
Right,
There was no way to jump to that. That was a possibility.
So, so Tyler, how much longer do you think it will take you to get the other materials?
Oh, at least a month. I mean, the soil pit analysis, contacting all the abutters by certified mail. There's a lot. I can't, I've got it all in front of me here, but just the submissions alone on page 17 is 3 pages long. There's 24 points of submissions for the preliminary plan.
Yep.
And so, you know, naturally I didn't want to do that if then I was going to be told, wow, there's a 180-day halt, because
yeah, certainly
there wouldn't be much point. If I'm not developing this, then I'm going elsewhere to keep the ball rolling on home building. The moratorium is unfortunate in my situation.
Well, personally, I have to agree with George's interpretation. I think this is a preliminary sketch plan, you know, which is the first step for a major subdivision. And I had a couple questions, but in terms of, you know, is this actually in the hopper? Not until you get the preliminary application in, which this is not.
Right. The application is, but not.
I don't think you did anything wrong, Tyler. It's just a major subdivision requires a lot of work. And
Yep,
I
and
agree,
this-
the moratorium coming up is unfortunate timing.
Okay, it's off from what Gary and I discussed and what my expectations were, because the application has been submitted. But you're saying we've got to get through the entire preliminary review, not just the application.
Or submitted it, or substantially submitted it.
Yeah, I don't think we go through it. I think it's an actual submittal.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that there's only one actual application form. It doesn't say this is the subdivision sketch plan application form.
Exactly.
And another one that says this is the subdivision preliminary application form. And then another one that says this is the subdivision final plan form. That's a
Right.
bit confusing. What the thing is, it's what's actually required to be submitted.
Well, and you know, the timeline is further complicated and not in your favor, Tyler, unfortunately, because under the preliminary plan, and I think you alluded to this, the notification of the butters has to happen 2 weeks prior to this submission of the preliminary plan.
Right.
So another question for you guys. So I think Mac just used the term substantially complete. So what would you consider to be a substantially completed application? If Tyler is racing the clock here, what should his priorities be?
Well, I think he alluded to it earlier when he said, you know, it's the information on, or at least the bulk of the information on pages 17, 18, and 19.
Yep.
So I'll just add a piece to this. The surveyor who I've been working with for 10 years is going in Tuesday for a very extensive procedures. I have a section of his lung removed, second time for lung cancer. So we've got a lot of things shaking here that will prevent me from moving forward with the preliminary plan, before November. So I guess it's just a matter of whether we want to have the discussion on the sketch plan, knowing that it will be at least 180 days before I can come back. You know, if we start the sketch plan now, can I come back when the moratorium's lifted to review the preliminary and hit the ground running? Hopefully that happens in March. Or do I need to table this, resubmit the sketch plan as soon as the moratorium's lifted and start over? Because the surveyors there's an existing road out there, an old woods road that Skip Hammond had constructed. There's just a lot of pieces with the engineer. Al Hodgson's doing the engineering, and with the soil pit analysis, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and this time of year everyone's under a crunch anyway. So
I don't know what the others feel, but I was personally thinking that I would like to do a site visit, partly because I'm new to the board and I haven't done a site visit for a major subdivision application. And so I think it's important for me, as part of my learning curve, to do that with the rest of the board. And so I think reviewing this tonight, but then also doing the site inspection, we'd have to do that. So I don't see how you could get an actual preliminary application in on time.
yeah, not going to happen, unfortunately.
So, is it a necessity to even have a sketch plan, or can he, as soon as the moratorium's lifted, can he come right in with the preliminary and hit the ground running? analyze without the sketch plan review and all that? I mean, if he has all his ducks in a row, he can just come right in without the sketch review, correct? Or is that a necessity?
I think the on-site inspection was the only piece that I saw making this, the sketch plan and the Q&A certainly benefits me to help get things in order. However, that 3 pages of submissions makes it quite clear. But to get to the next, it does say, within 6 months after the on-site inspection by the board, the subdivider shall submit an application for approval of a preliminary plan. So if you guys would be willing to do the site visit, I would think we then check that box and could submit the preliminary plan as soon as the moratorium is lifted, like Craig suggests. At least then we've got that out of the way. And if it is March, that's not the ideal time for a site visit to see what we got going under all the snow.
So from my point of view, I would say, if we go through this sketch plan review, which I'm thinking of as the pre-application procedure, where we review the sketch plan, schedule a site visit, that kind of thing, that would be acceptable. And if there is a moratorium that's 180 days, that would allow you time, Tyler, to maybe do some things, ducks in a row, like Craig said, and then afterwards follow the submission requirements and make sure that things are done and there. Does the board feel it's an acceptable process?
I'm willing to give as much flexibility as we have to give. I'm just real concerned that the way the ordinance is drafted, that Tyler won't have any vested rights until such time as he submits the preliminary application. You can't just artificially break it up and say, well, we'll continue where we left off after the moratorium's over. It's either impacted by the moratorium. If it is, the answer to that question is yes. Then it has to, the subdivision has to comply with the new ordinance, not the old ordinance. If the answer to the question is no, then we can process this over the course of the winter. But at the moment, it sounds to me at least like we haven't gone far enough in terms of what's been submitted to to be considered in the preliminary application phase.
Right.
Right.
I think what you're also saying, George, is that part of the rewrite of the subdivision ordinance, it's going to be significantly different, right? So
Yeah,
just getting through the sketch plan isn't necessarily meaningful, given what we're going to come up with on the other side.
That could be the case. I'm just, it'll definitely be different. It's kind of too early for me to say how different, but.
Do you guys have a timeline on when you expect the updated ordinance? Is that, I was following along, I guess it was almost a year ago, or at least this past winter, but I haven't received any info since. Do you have a feel for when that will be wrapped up?
So Tyler, I talked to the planner who's from KV Cog, who's helping these guys, and he still thinks that November is still realistic, which would allow us plenty of time still to get it on the March ballot.
Gotcha.
And in fact, he's and I think all you guys have received it, but he sent some more information for you guys to review in order to sort of hasten your next discussion.
But for me to proceed with the preliminary plan as laid out here in the 2010 ordinance would not be sensible to expect to hit the ground running, because when I hit the ground, there will be a new ordinance with like different submittals. Yeah. And I wouldn't
Yes.
be here, you know, I wouldn't have taken you guys' time if I didn't think that we could start the process now. So I understand that, and it's unfortunate, but is what it is.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, we do love spending time with you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
In the way of a consolation prize, there are a number of things on your sketch plan that I really like, including the first ever buffer along a stream that I've seen proposed.
Yes, it's a very unique property. There was an old cedar shingle sawmill, water powered sawmill on Meadowbrook and Cedar Mill Ridge. So of this piece, I own 4 different parcels at all, but there's about 70 acres. This piece is about 66 acres, but it dates all the way back to the original Yetton farm off the West Road.
Mm-hmm.
Runs parallel with Buster Hammond's land, and it's beautiful, beautiful property. A lot of history. About 100 years ago that the sawmill came down, but I've since talked to people whose grandfather has one of the old sawmills, and you can see that old granite wall where it was originally pinned in. And
Really?
yeah, it's fascinating.
Cool.
And Meadowbrook right now is bone dry. I mean, it's
Right.
wild to think that they were able to run any type of production through there, but they had it dialed in.
Yeah, maybe it was a springtime.
All hand split granite. I mean, it's stunning.
Wow.
You know, just to not make your time totally wasted here, one question I had, or suggestion I had for you, maybe in the way of homework, is there's a, I don't know, are you familiar with Inland Fish and Wildlife beginning with habitat mapping?
I am. The deer wintering.
Yeah, potential deer wintering. So that might be, you know, something you might want to have Inland Fish and Wildlife look at, because just looking at it on Google Earth, the part, let me see, west of the stream, you know, obviously it's been logged pretty heavily, and I can't imagine that's a deer yard anymore. The part that you, in your site sketch plan, we're talking about setting aside and not developing, that may or may not be a deer yard. You may wish, I don't know, maybe it doesn't really matter since you're setting it aside, but it's something to consider.
I appreciate that, George. Yeah, we've actually met with those guys.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've actually met with those folks in Sydney to discuss just that. So we've got that in motion. This is cut heavily. This was originally called Piney Acres back when Darrell Day did this in the late 80s. Some of the road frontage subdivision, and then Skip and Bill Pepper, who I personally off, have cut all of the softwood. So where I'm proposing development, there is no softwood. It's all young. There's certainly no deer wintering there, but that is a big piece. That's one of the reasons I'm proposing to maintain all of that other land undeveloped for that specific reason.
The only other thing I guess I would raise, again, in the spirit of not having wasted your time here, is I actually drove by, and I think I know where the entrance is. It's like about I don't know, 150 feet of gravel road, and then it kind of ends at pucker brush.
Exactly.
Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That is, I don't know what the speed limit is on there, on that road. There's no posted sign. But it determines the sight line that's required. It probably will require, it'll probably, knowing that will probably determine what the sight lines required at the intersection between your subdivision road and the Dunn Road.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be good to iron that out in advance. And maybe that there's a post there right as you turn off the West Road onto the Dunn Road without a sign on it. So I don't know, maybe if you dig around in the ditch, you'll find it, but that, or maybe Anthony can have one posted, but
Not the road commissioner, George.
Okay, well, somebody in town can.
Good point. Thank you. I'll look into that.
Well, while I love spending time with Tyler, I've had my fill of the rest of you. So now that Nick is online, I'm bugging out. So y'all have a good evening.
Thank you, Anthony. So Tyler, what do you think? I mean, it sounds like the timing of this is just not the greatest.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate, but I accept it for what it is.
So how can we help you going forward? I want to make sure we answer your questions, or the town can, to the best of our ability. You know what we're up against with. We have a subdivision ordinance that we're trying to get in and ready for a March meeting. We also know that they'll be voting in November, which may or may not result in a moratorium on subdivision. So what else do you need?
Yeah, assuming the moratorium passes, which I think we all expect that it will. Really nothing until I can put eyes on the updated ordinance. That will be the next step for me, and so I can expedite the process. It's going to be very challenging. There's certain things I can do that I know will be required with the update, but it's tough to commit until I know exactly what the revisions will be.
Right.
So,
Tyler, I don't know if Gary gave you the background, but the select board wanted the subdivisions included in this moratorium because of one that is being contemplated in the area of the salt contamination in Belgrade Depot.
okay, I was unaware of that. Gotcha.
So until we figure out what to do with the salt contamination, they kind of wanted to hold off on the subdivisions.
Yeah, that certainly seems sensible.
Right.
If the ordinance is updated and ready to go in March, it was my understanding in talking over with Anthony that the moratorium can be lifted on this piece independent of cell towers, solar farms, and the other pieces involved. Is that the case as you guys understand it? That the moratorium's not a strict 180 day, it can be lifted with the updated ordinance? I posed that question at the public meeting, and that was the consensus at the select board meeting, but I'm
not aware of that, so other board members may know more about how that works out.
I don't know for sure, but if I shouldn't say I don't know.
Where would I go for that answer? Is that a select board?
I would get a clarification from Anthony because it might mean him having to talk to the town attorney.
Okay. Otherwise, it's May regardless of when the ordinance is updated.
Yeah. I mean, if we can stay on schedule, we certainly should be able to get the subdivision ordinance, as Anthony laid out earlier. We should be able to get that to the voters in March.
Still dealing with the salt issue.
Yeah, but we can get around that by possibly dealing with how, what information is required when you're in an area of known groundwater contamination like that. And
yeah, that's right. Yep.
I believe, you may want to check, Tyler, but I don't have the moratorium language in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it says up to 180 days. It doesn't say it has to be 180 days. So I think we can end the moratorium as soon as we want.
Okay. And that's what Dan Newman said as well, but it's a very dynamic time for everyone. So it's tough to know for sure. I
don't think anybody wants it to last any longer than it needs to.
No,
Right.
no, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I think I would just read the moratorium language specifically.
Yep.
If it says up to versus will be, you know.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate the time, guys, and we'll take this up in the spring.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I am, so planning board, I'm back to the agenda. And we have a shoreline application for G&L Contracting. Owner is Dan McCarron, 41 Cole Road. Cole Road. Wait, is this Adam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
So we're on to your this application 2061. It looks like on map 27 lot 2.
Yep.
Permit 2061. 41. This is located at 41 Cole Road. It's on Great Pond. It looks like what's being proposed is an addition to second floor of main cottage, siding, roof, screened in covered porch, bunkhouse. Am I reading this right? 24 by 24?
Yes. Yep.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Craig.
He's not adding a screen porch, he's just screening in the covered porch that's there.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you. Looks like 6 says a new four bedroom septic to be installed. The present number of bedrooms is 2. We want to add 2 more bedrooms to make a total of 4, correct?
Correct. One to the house and one to the quote unquote bunkhouse.
Okay. This was purchased in 2020. And am I correct? Dan purchased it and you are representing him as the contractor.
Yes. I think he's on here as well, listening.
Okay, awesome. I see a Dan. I'm thinking it's probably the same Dan. Okay. Total lot area is 0.7 acres. So this is a non-conforming lot.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And we have the letter from Dan authorizing Adam to represent him. I'm looking at the pictures that were submitted. Thank you for doing that. Is that it looks like maybe the first picture, Adam, what's that?
So that's just there's an existing bunkhouse there now. There's 3 buildings on the property. There's the main camp, which is the third picture. The first picture is that's like the back side of the bunkhouse. The second picture, so page 4, it's like the side entrance of the bunkhouse. And then obviously the last picture that's the main camp. If you're looking at that, the water's behind you. We'll screen in the porch you're looking at, and then on that upper section to the right would be the section, essentially second floor and dormer. Would be a bedroom on the water side and a bathroom on the driveway side, which is reflected in the plans below.
Adam, is this existing bunkhouse, which looks like it's on the verge of falling into the ground, is that going to be demolished and the new one's going in its same place?
Pretty much, yeah. It's going to demolish the old one. It's just going to get slid a little closer to the garage, but it's well out of that 100-foot range. You kind of see if you look on page 6, it's going to be the same, like, essentially parallel to the garage, and you can see the dotted. That was the old bunkhouse that we're going to tear down and remove.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. That helps. I'm tilting because I was looking sideways at it. And I can see how I think you've written in there, remove existing bunkhouse, new bunkhouse, then existing garage, and here's the existing driveway, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Water. And let's see. So the distance from the normal high water mark to the front edge of the current camp, am I reading that 35 feet?
Yes. Yeah.
And then this other stuff for the bunkhouse and that all that business is going to be 35 plus 61 plus whatever the dimension is of the house.
Yeah, I think it says it on there, 30 something.
35.
Okay, so that's 35, that's 70 plus 61. So that's more than 100, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely more than 100.
Yes.
Okay. And Adam, I did hear you say that before. I was just making sure it's adding up in my mind as I'm looking at this. First floor plan. Okay. Second floor plan.
Adam, if I'm interpreting the profile drawings correctly, the maximum height will be the same as it is currently?
Correct, yes. Yeah, we're just taking that dormer and just essentially take second floor and sliding it over and adding a dormer on both sides. But yes, the height won't change. Like if you go to the third picture, that roof line, what you see, that's all going to stay. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to take that gable end essentially off, cut a door in there, and just extend over. It's kind of hard to see in that picture, but if you see how the porch is on the left side, it does a hip roof all the way around the entire structure. So we're just going to cover that existing. So we're not adding any extra like footprint. We're just adding a little extra square footage to that building.
Peter, can I say something?
Please do.
So I guess I'm a little bit confused about these shoreline zoning applications. We've had a couple of them now, and I can't find on the application anywhere that the applicant's required to state what actual shoreline district they're in. And personally, I find that frustrating because your requirements change depending on what district you're in. And so if I don't know what actual shoreline zoning district the proposal's in, I don't necessarily know what to apply. And this came up, Adam, in your last application.
Correct.
So this one, it's not there. And in addition, it does say, but outside of that, it says, in terms of what's required for the permit application, you do need a site plan to scale, which you have, but it also requires that the site plan have a lot of things or other things that you don't have. For example, stormwater runoff control measures, vegetated areas, it's all there. And so I don't feel like I can appropriately review this proposal because the site plan doesn't show me anything in terms of what's existing on site in terms of vegetation or topography, you know, what's the slope, any of that.
I guess, so it'd be, I have actually the map of, it's limited residential district, but like, I've done a bunch of these in the past, obviously. Haven't ever, except for that last meeting, been asked what district it's in, other than unless I know it's like resource protected or slope district. Knowingly, then we obviously apply those rules to it. But as for a site plan to scale, something like this is typically what I will give to the planning board and typically what I see present the planning board. Sounds like what you're asking for, which I don't disagree, would be a complete full survey, a topo survey with all the lines and every single tree laid out, which, you know, cost to the homeowner is, you know, $4,000 or $5,000. You know, since I put some pictures on there, and typically we, you know, note in there, I think it's like one tree coming down out of the 100-foot mark. You know, if you want like a Google Earth shot of what it looks like from above to see a canopy, I definitely gladly give that. But an actual full survey, I don't believe that is kind of what they're asking for. I think they're looking to see where the buildings are, the distances, and make sure we meet the setbacks.
I'm just reading in the actual shoreline zoning ordinance. It says the site plan shall include at a minimum location of structures, roads and driveways, walkways. I don't see any walkways there from the house to the water. Wastewater disposal systems, you hand drew in the septic, but drinking water well and lines, there's no drinking water well anywhere on the plan.
It's from
power
the
lines, there's no power lines, right of way, stormwater runoff control measures. I mean, it's just, I'm just reading what's in the actual requirement of the ordinance.
Right. Well, it's lake water, and then the power is going to end up being underground, so that wouldn't be on there for there. So I mean, it sounds like what I'm missing would be the trees, but I've honestly never seen trees on a site plan that's been submitted, other than a couple that I've had Annie Dunbar come in and survey and show all the trees. You know, to do a full-scale set like that would mean to hire a surveyor every single permit going to the planning board, which if that's what you want, then I need to know this to go back to the customer and say, hey, the only way we can get a permit is it's going to cost $4,000 or $5,000 to get a full survey done to locate all the trees on this piece of property.
Adam, is there any earthwork being done?
Sorry, what was that?
Is there any earthwork being done? You putting it on a foundation? Or?
The back structure will be on a foundation, then obviously the septic. But that'd be the only earthwork out of that 100-foot. There's nothing being done on the actual camp itself for earthwork.
So it's basically a remodel and a little addition on the second floor.
On the main structure, yes, and then the new structure would obviously bring an excavator in, tear it down, and then dig out for the frost walls at 2424.
Yeah, but that's beyond the 100-foot mark.
Correct, yes.
Adam, to get back to Mac's point, when you picked up the application, you're probably never going to see this. We developed a sample site plan to illustrate all the things that Mac read from the ordinance. Did you get this when you picked up the application?
No, I just download the one page. That's all I have.
Okay.
The application itself, and like, you know, typically something like this, it goes back to all the other ones we've submitted before, hasn't been a problem. So, you know, if they want to define all the trees, I mean.
No, it isn't so much individual trees as, this is actually my wife's family's camp, and I use as an example because we kept on bumping against the same issue. And and like, for example, vegetation, you know, it's, I mean, actually submitting a Google Earth shot would be, with the property lines on it, would be as good as anything, but it's matter of shading in the areas that are wooded versus, you know, what's lawn. Because some camps, obviously, that we encounter, as much lawn as woods, but they're the rarity. Most places are all wooded. I suspect this is too, if I recall correctly.
It's mostly lawn. Like between the septic is and the lake, there's like 3 trees, maybe one back where the bunkhouse is, and then there's maybe a couple down the side, on the north side. But majority of that, which would be the question, is do you want the tree cover or do you want just the location of the tree? Because a tree is only 2 foot, but the canopy might be 30 by 30.
Yeah,
you can see in a Google Earth shot easily.
I mean, the whole point of it is, of course, to help us figure out if trees are going to be cut as part of the project. Obviously, in this case, that's not the case. At least I don't believe it is. And whether we need to, bring into play the, replanting standard and that kind of thing. I think what you've presented meets most of the requirements. I think this is a matter of how we just go forward and maybe just picking up it's not a matter of surveying each tree bowl or anything of that nature. It's more to give us a sense of, what, if anything, how much grass is there versus woodland.
Well, I didn't.
Where the right of ways would be, where would the power lines are because they sometimes come into play when we have to debate whether or not to move a non-conforming structure back or not because it's being totally reconstructed or that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, I can share my screen and show you the Google shot of where it is if you want to see that. But like the Google shot, what shows pretty much tree coverage, but if you're actually there on site, based on like those pictures, it's actually fairly open from the actual camp to the water. Which we're not touching anything there. We're in that back section where the existing one is. And the power lines, we're far enough away from them. They come down the road themselves. But I can definitely put more detail on the other ones going forward. I get 2 more permits for 2 other places in shoreline zone going in next week. So, if you want to see all that spelled out, or for instance, when Max said, well, a lot of these are seasonal camps. There is no well and there's no water line. It's just a black line over the top of the ground, which I can note in there in the remarks. It's not a problem.
Yeah. No, that's not uncommon, of course.
All right.
That would be my suggestion.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish, George.
No, I was going to say that's just my suggestion, because I think most of what we need is here. It's the vegetation and some of the other things you cited. Contours I don't believe are required. Although it's always a good thing to ask, and your point's well taken, Mac, about, I think in the beginning, well, this is kind of a COVID-19 kind of impact. Normally when we meet in person, we have the shoreline zoning map right there. And so that's how we know what zone we're talking about and what requirements to apply. Because obviously that's a very basic thing, just right up there with, is this a non-conforming structure and is this a non-conforming lot? Right. So that's a point well taken.
So Mac, go ahead, because you had a comment.
One other thing is the wastewater disposal system. There's no permit attached to this, and it's part of the requirement is that you need to have a permit. And it says also in here that if it was, I forget exactly, but there should be an inspection. An inspection of the wastewater system included, because it was sold in 2020, and something about if it was sold after 2018, you need to have an inspection done to make sure that the subsurface wastewater system is functioning.
Well, they want to put a new one, right? So
Correct. Yeah, we put a new one in there. It's actually supposed to have it yesterday or today, but Ken Stratton's a little bit behind. It's all staked out, ready to go. It's supposed to be there Monday. Been about 30 phone calls to him in the last 3 or 4 weeks to get it done. But yeah, it will be a new septic. The one that's there failed.
So they're upgrading the septic, which is required. So
Right, which is all heading in the right direction, right, Craig? That's exactly where we want to be going.
so we do need the prints, but
Yep. So, and
Max
other
Wright,
planning,
we need to have the permit from Gary.
right. Yeah, it's on page 64 from what I'm reading. It seems like it's pretty clear. Okay, so what are some of the we talked about some of the
Peter?
Yep.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I actually called Adam tonight and I said, I'm sure the board's gonna raise an issue because I don't have your septic plan. And he said, well, it's coming, it's supposed to be coming Monday. So take it from there and see what the board says. But we did discuss it just this evening.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. So that's certainly one outstanding issue at the moment, right? Is that item.
I have a question for Adam, if I may.
Sure.
Adam, this is just a piddly little thing, but so the new bunkhouse will be what, 576 square feet. Down in the bottom part of the application where it says proposed structure square footage, I can't quite make it out, but the last 2 digits are 26 square feet. So I don't know if something got messed up or left off or what.
So the bunkhouse will be 576, but the proposed structure square footage we're actually changing from existing is 126 feet on the bunkhouse and 184 feet on the second floor of the existing camp.
Oh, so that's the incremental increase in the size of the bunkhouse? I got
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep,
I
no, I
see.
got it. I didn't. Yep.
So that's a plus sign, right? What I'm seeing?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was trying to make it out to be a 4.
but does it matter the square footage on the house?
Not
Yeah.
really, not in this circumstance.
No, I didn't think so. Okay.
Right. Good question, Craig.
It's footprint, not square footage. Correct?
Correct.
Footprint, right.
Which I'm going to put on my Mac hat because, this current application form it asks the person to write down something in square footage as though it's, an important thing, right?
I think I wrote it down more for the paying the permit on the square footage that we're adding. It's the main reason that it's there.
Yeah.
Okay. Board members, how do we feel about this application going forward? I mean, I know we have a lot of good things here in front of us that Adam supplied. When we've talked about this, we know that there are still a few things that we would like to have, I think, included. I'm curious if any things could be handled by conditions or I don't know, how does the board feel? The plumbing, the thing about the septic system, that's a big thing. I know that.
Right. Setting that aside for a moment, I don't know exactly how to handle that, but I wanted to follow up on a point Mac made earlier, and that has to do with stormwater. And just for your benefit, Mac, for better or worse, the way we've been handling that, because nobody ever submits a stormwater management plan, we've been handling it as a condition of approval on a routine basis whenever additional impervious surface is being added as a consequence of a project. So in this case, more roof square footage is being added. And I think that's right. Yeah. And so we would need to, basically require use of the DEP's best management practices, which are spelled out in the document that's cited in the ordinance in the stormwater section, to be complied with. And so that's, how we've been kind of skinning that cat, just for your benefit. In an ideal world, we would, require everybody to submit a stormwater management plan, but this has the advantage of everybody getting a copy of what those best management practices are as a consequence, and hopefully better compliance. I don't know about that. That's indeed the case, but the only other thing that I don't really have any issues with this other than the what Mac raised about the wastewater, lack of a wastewater permit, which is a big one, but I don't have any doubt we'll eventually have that. The only other than stormwater, I think it might be prudent, as in all bunkhouses, to have a condition not unsimilar to what is on the Jones application, to clarify that this is never to have a kitchen appliance or preparation of meals in it, so it doesn't become a second dwelling.
Yep. Good point.
As a, basically as a clarification and a precaution.
I really don't see anything holding us back once all that stuff's provided. So if we can do it with conditions, it would, just save some time and because does anybody see anything that would hold us back?
I guess I'd like to ask Gary if he's still available. Do you see any problems with this having getting the necessary permit for a septic disposal system from what you know of the area, shallow bedrock or anything like that?
Ken Stratton's already been out. He's flagged it all out. He just hasn't drawn up the paperwork yet.
Okay.
Adam said he anticipates having it Monday.
And you could issue a permit shortly thereafter.
I could issue it Tuesday if he brings it in. Yep. Yeah.
And so, Gary, you don't see any like substrate issue there that would say, oh my God, you can't do this, right?
No, I do not.
Okay.
No, I don't, Peter.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. So I want to make sure I'm honoring Mac's points that he brought up, in that we're supported by what you had to say. So for Adam, for your benefit, as we have complete data sets, in these applications that come forward, when we revised the shoreline zone ordinance, we tried to kind of hone in on some things, and we did try to provide also examples for what would be expected at the town office. You are savvy and did some downloads from the internet, which it sounds like that's not matching up with what Nick might have. So I apologize for that difference, but we are trying to steer people into submitting those types of things that we've outlined. So going forward, anyway, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. Since you're a regular customer, Adam, you might want to get Nick to send you that, or.
Yeah, I made notes of it, so the ones you get next Thursday will have everything.
Yeah, because we put that together for the person who doesn't come in like you would, who would be like lost without this guiding kind of document. It gives examples and shows you what we'd be expecting. And it's not highfalutin, or it doesn't have to require necessarily, you know, expensive anything. It's just making sure you indicate something on there. Okay. So Craig, you had said what else is holding this up. I don't really see much else holding this. I'm thinking this is based on the assurances we've been given so far, both from Gary and the applicant and our conversations, that we can probably do these things and probably have the permit from Gary here shortly. So I'm wondering if we can do this with conditions. It's a little unusual. This is going a little further than we would normally do, but how does the board feel about that approach? I mean, am I stepping over the line when I say that, or what?
Well, if we put a condition on it and you can't provide it, then it's no good. So I think we can move forward.
George.
This circumstance is a little different than many others because of Ken Stratton already having done the soil site evaluation and knowing what the results of those are. And it's just a matter of finishing the design to around that soil test. My concern would be in a situation like, well, the Desmond subdivision, for example, where you have bedrock within 10 inches of the soil, the earth's surface, you know, where you may not be able to put a septic system in, or at least not one that isn't highly engineered. So in this case, I would say, I think we would be safe to do it by condition, although I wouldn't want to make a common practice of it because it's a pretty fundamental requirement. And tie it to that permit has to be issued prior to the start of construction.
Mac, how do you feel about that?
I'm just going to abstain from the vote. I'm not going to do one way or the other. I feel like this is my, you know, I'm new, kind of like the subdivision application. I'm still learning the ropes, and, you know, in terms of process, what the planning board does and things like that. So I'm just not, I'm not comfortable putting a vote one way or the other because I'm not necessarily comfortable with the expectations that are on me as a planning board member. So I'm not saying one way good or bad, just I'm going to abstain, you know, and we can talk as a board later,
Sure.
you know.
Yep. Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. Rich, how do you feel about this approach? It's a little slightly unusual. So, Rich Baker, if you're speaking, you're muted at this time.
How's that?
Great.
I think with the proper conditions and things we're dealing with, that we could deal with it the way we are.
Okay. All right. Like George, thank you very much, Rich. I think like George talked about, I wouldn't want to make this a common practice because this is a fundamental piece. But I would be willing to do it in this case with the proper conditions and tying it to what George had mentioned. So if there's nothing else, no other questions for the applicant or the owner, because I know he has joined. I would entertain a motion on this application.
Peter?
Hi, George.
Just a process matter. we need to, at least on the recorded record, make a decision about the 8 findings we need to make to be able to prove something.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that we do findings of fact and law by any means. I think that's a discussion for another day with the town's attorney, which I think Anthony's planning to organize. But since the ordinance doesn't require us to go through those findings whenever we place a condition on a permit. And I think it could be simply done by, does anybody see that any of those 8 will not be met?
It's a great,
in lieu of what the conditions are going to be, or taking into consideration that we're addressing some of it by condition.
okay.
So what are we
So-
looking at? The 8 things.
Yes, sir. On page 66.
Where do I find that?
Page 66.
Okay.
So George, are you thinking that that we just quickly go through each one and then just say either yes or no, or if there's something that we want to bring up, do it at that time for each one?
That, or I mean, you know, we need to consider all of them, but you know, we could all lump them together and ask, does anybody see any one of these that's not being met, or that we need a condition to be able to meet?
Okay.
Either way,
I'll
whatever you think is more expedient.
I think lumping them would be expedient. I just want to make sure that people feel comfortable doing that. Does everybody feel comfortable doing that? So we look at them as 8 items individually. If there is anything that someone needs to bring up about any one of them that we do, then otherwise we could do it almost as a slate, right, of items. Okay, well, that's all right. So for the board's benefit, number 2, I think with the condition that we're talking about for the proper installation of the septic that's been proposed and that we have that permit in hand would address number 2. I have no issues with any other points at this time. Of those 8, anybody else?
I would just note that if we place a condition on requiring addressing the storm water from the roof, will assist in meeting number 2.
Yes.
As well as number 8.
Yes. Yep. I think that's going to be, yep. That will be common for us is what I was going to say, I believe. Craig and Rich.
I'm all good with it.
And Mac, if you have any ideas, I know you're going to abstain from voting, but if you have any ideas, please let me know.
He just shook his head no.
No? Okay. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't have anything.
Okay. Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. Anytime, just jump in, okay? Okay. All right. So we feel comfortable that some conditions that we're going to put on will address positive findings of fact for numbers 2 and 8. And I think we feel there are 2 areas we're going to do that, right? So procedurally, I think we're in a place where we could hear a motion with conditions that address these things.
I'll take a shot at it, and then everybody can take their best whacks at it. So I would make a motion that we approve the application with 3 conditions. The first being, and Nick, please speak up if I'm going too fast. The first is construction may not be initiated until such time as the Belgrade local plumbing inspector issues a permit for the replacement wastewater disposal system, a copy of which will be provided to the planning board. Did you get that, Nick?
Yeah, you're good with that one.
Okay. Number 2 would be stormwater from all proposed new or expanded roof areas to be managed in accordance with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection stormwater best management practices as outlined in DEP publication, conservation practices for homeowners, and in accordance with section 15I of the Belgrade Shoreland Zoning Ordinance.
What was that section again? 15?
15I.
All right, I'm good on that one.
Okay, and lastly, installation of kitchen appliances and the preparation of meals is prohibited in the proposed bunkhouse.
Adam, do you have a question?
I just want to clarify, is the appliances, is that stove, microwave, or is that like fridge and dishwasher as well? Just want to make sure it's very clear and say appliances. Is it all appliances? I guess fridge would be the main question.
Yeah, I believe it's all appliances. That's how we interpreted for the Joneses as well.
Okay. Is that, for my reference, is that how you're moving forward on all future permits that don't have the proper square footage and water frontage to have 2 full dwellings? They're not going to allow a dorm fridge in that second building?
It's to ensure, yeah, that it, because the definition of residential dwelling includes a kitchen. That's the difference between it and almost any other kind of structure.
Right. And then I just want to make sure we're clear on that, because, like, you know, a wet bar, quote unquote, would be sink, fridge. And I know in the past, previous to this meeting, that's been allowed. So I just want to make sure very clear that whether we're allowed to have a wet bar in there or not. Because I know we've done some in the past couple of years and they've allowed us to do that. It's just been stipulated, no microwave, you know, no coffee pot, no stove, no way to prepare food.
Right. Yeah. That I believe that's why we put in the preparation of meals versus having a air popcorn maker.
Okay. So if you had a 6-foot piece of countertop with kitchen cabinets but no appliances, that would be okay?
I believe so, and I believe that's what the Joneses have. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary.
That is what they have, yes.
And please jump in if I'm saying something.
Oh, I think typically what we say is no cooking facilities.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. That's based on my previous experience on all of these. It's no cooking, so we always stipulate in there no stove, no microwave, no way to cook food, heat up food, anything like that. But the fridge is kind of a big one, because I know I have another 2 coming up that they want to be able to put in a fridge because it's like a living room area. They don't want to cook anything in there, but, you know, might make or break a lot of places that I do if they're going to limit that. I want to tell the customers ahead of time and not, you know, after a meeting.
No, I think what we usually say is no cooking facilities.
All right.
So should we change it? Because what I said was kitchen appliances, which is the same as for the Joneses.
Didn't Jones just say no cooking facilities?
Give me a minute. The Joneses condition reads, installation of kitchen appliances and the preparation of meals is prohibited in the proposed structure.
Okay, so that would include a refrigerator.
Yeah, it would.
But I think, I don't know, I think typically in the past, we've always said no cooking facilities, but I mean, I have a refrigerator in my garage, but I can't cook out here.
Oh, really? You don't lose your blowtorch for that? So why don't I amend that to installation of cooking facilities?
Is prohibited.
Right. Installation of cooking facilities and the preparation of meals is prohibited in the proposed bunkhouse.
That works, I think.
I'd be happy with that.
I just need to check one thing. Yeah, that would be consistent with the definition of residential dwelling.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I believe that is exactly correct. And so to be clear, that sentence there, George, you know, the term shall include mobile homes and rental units that contain cooking, sleeping, and toilet facilities. So I think what you've stated is consistent with that. Not outside the bounds. So does that complete the motion with the 3 conditions?
It does,
Okay,
for me, anyway.
thank you. So we have a motion on the floor with 3 conditions, and just to be sure, Nick, could you read back the 3 conditions, please?
Sure. So
Or
number
George?
1 is construction may not be initiated until such time as the town local plumbing inspector issues a permit for the replacement wastewater disposal system. A copy of the permit shall be provided to the planning board. Number 2 is stormwater from all proposed new or expanded roof areas on the proposed bunkhouse and existing principal residential dwelling is to be managed in accordance with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection Stormwater Best Management Practices as outlined in DEP publication Conservation Practices for Homeowners and in accordance with Section 15I of the Belgrade Shoreline Zoning Ordinance. And lastly, installation of cooking facilities and the preparation of meals is prohibited in the proposed bunkhouse.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Craig. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been with 3 conditions. It's been seconded. Does the board have any more comments on this application? Anybody? And if not, I turn to Adam and or Dan. Any other questions for us?
I have any.
Okay. All right. If that's the case, we shall vote. I'll do a roll call. I'll go left to right as I see you. So George,
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Mac, are you going to abstain?
I'm abstaining, correct?
So we have 2 in favor, 1 abstain. Rich Baker, I think, thumbs up. So that's 3 in favor. I vote in favor. So 4 in favor, none opposed, 1 abstain. All right, so the motion passes. Adam, the permit will be mailed to you following the completion of the mission, right?
You'll have it first of the week. Apologize for that. Thank you.
Okay, and just want to make sure to guide you or anybody else that wants to get those the example sheets, right, for applications going forward. It's helpful.
Yes.
All right. All right. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. Have a very good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. All right. Planning board members. Let's see. I think the last bit of official business really would be minutes. So we do have the minutes from June 18. Does everybody have a copy? Yeah. Okay.
And I'm at my house right now, and I forgot a copy of the minutes at work. So go ahead and just read out any errors you see, and I'll make the edits when I get back tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Actually, if it would help, Nick, I have them here and I could do it and then scan it and send it to you.
That works for me.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
probably just about ready, I think. I can see Craig is reviewing still.
I'm all set.
Right. Thank you, Craig. Okay. What edits or recommendations do we have for helping out the minutes? Anything?
I don't have any.
You don't have any?
No.
Okay. Greg, do you have anything to add?
No.
Mac, I'm going to ask you anyway because I want your opinion, although I know you were not on the board at that time. And anything? No. Okay. And Rich, I can't see you and I can't hear you, but if you have anything, let me know. Okay. All right. Yep, I'm okay with them. So. I do want to thank the people that took notes because the commercial application, that's that first one on there. There's a lot of stuff that goes on and it's hard to capture it all. So thank you. I believe between Anthony and Nick, they did a great job capturing what we could. So nothing else from me. I'd entertain a motion to accept or to approve the minutes, if one would be made.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of June 18th as written.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor and seconded. Any more comments? All those in favor? Do a roll call. Craig, you're right in my center.
Yes.
Okay, and then George.
Yes.
Mac, I know you were not on the board, so we're not going to have you vote, right? Rich was here. Rich, can you turn on your camera so you can give me a thumbs up? Okay. So.
There he is.
Thumbs up. I'm seeing a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. So, and then I vote yes. So, so 4 in favor. I would say officially 1 abstain, and none opposed. Right. So.
So Nick, I guess I don't need to send you anything.
You're all set.
We're all set. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for Nick.
Yep.
Has there been any type of decommissioning plan or escrow or anything brought to town yet?
I haven't seen anything come through or heard anything. So
I mean, they still have time. I was just asking.
yeah, no, I haven't seen anything come in or heard anything come in. So I'm guessing not yet.
I did notice in the newspaper that in the first projects that the main PUC selected, that wasn't on the list.
Interesting.
2 or 3 rounds, so right?
Yeah, right. No, you're right. It just means it didn't make the first cut.
Yep.
Did want to mention in the Sunday paper there was quite an article about degrading water quality. Did you folks see that? So a lot of attention given on that, rightfully so.
Anthony was one of the volunteers. I had volunteered as well, but they'd finished up the zone that I was supposed to work in before the day before I was needed. So
yeah, I must admit I was a little sad, more than a little sad by reading that. But we do what we can. Gary, any town business from your end that you'd like to share?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I got an application today from Sebago Techniques, and they're proposing a 15 condo unit down to Camp Bombazine. So that'll be on some agenda.
Wow.
I got a commercial development review application from Sean Grant. So that'll be on the agenda. Adam Gardner next week is bringing me in 2 more shoreline zoning applications. So those will be on the agenda. I think that's about it. The other thing I would say is I got to talk to Nick, because I thought when somebody downloaded a building permit application that George's site plan was with it, but apparently it's not.
No, I checked while you guys have discussion. It is on there as a packet. I mean, you can download just one page if you want to avoid the rest. The packet is there.
So Sean's only, not Sean, what's his name?
Adam.
Adam's only downloading the first page.
Apparently.
I guess. I don't know. Maybe he's just printing the first page.
Okay.
The only thing that's up there is the packet. You can't get one page nowhere on the site that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, now he knows.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. And Gary, you've touched upon some really good points tonight with those upcoming applications. Clearly, a lot on our plate, a lot on our upcoming agendas. I think you probably all heard Anthony talk about us thinking how we're going to accomplish all these things.
Mm-hmm.
We're burdened, man. That's all there is to it. There's a lot going on.
I know Anthony's very concerned that he doesn't want to burn his volunteer members out, obviously.
Right.
You know, and I don't think anybody wants to spend a Saturday in the town office reviewing applications. You know, I wouldn't.
I don't want to.
No, and I wouldn't either, you know. But I don't know. It's like the fall rush is on and everybody's bringing stuff in. It's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. So.
Gary, I don't know if you heard earlier Anthony talking that Nick would still be on the agenda for our next meeting to discuss the subdivision ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that on top of these applications. Is that correct?
I think so. Anthony and I have had a discussion, and I think Anthony has kind of wanted to take over what he puts on the agenda. I think he has the feeling that I put too much on and the meeting's too long. So I said, have at it.
Yeah. Let you be the bad guy.
I said, you look at the pile and you tell me.
Yeah.
So he wants to be involved with that. So like I said, you tell me what you want on the agenda.
Yep.
So that's what I'm going to do.
The boy, that's going to be a late night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Sean Grant's application, that's a condition, I believe, of his consent decree, right?
Yes. So what he's doing, he's going from a home occupation to a full-fledged commercial business.
Oh.
Yep. Where he could store boats, shrink wrap boats, and all of that. And his application is pretty complete. It was prepared by Al Hodgson. Al Hodgson put it together, so it looks like a good application.
Yep, good. Now, did I understand correctly that Al's is Al who's going in for surgery?
I don't know.
I thought that was the surveyor from K&K.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So Al was fighting cancer or had.
Oh, did he?
Oh, so maybe I'm misspeaking then.
No, I think you're right, Craig. I think you're right. You're right.
Al lost his wife a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So is Rich still on?
I see his ceiling.
I was going to congratulate him on his moose.
Yes,
I saw
that's-
pictures.
That's big news.
That was a nice one. He's not hearing me.
He's back. He's back. I think he's leaning over. And Rich, give us a thumbs up. He's. Yeah, I think I see moose meat there. What's going
on? He probably ate too much moose meat and he fell asleep.
All right.
So guys, I'm sorry. I didn't know when to bring this up, and I don't know. Just in terms of process, like I feel like last week I may have not done things, or last meeting I may have not done things properly, because obviously my vote was not the correct one legally. And I don't want to make that mistake moving forward. And in addition, I just feel like at tonight's shoreline zone, the one that we just approved with conditions, I just feel like more should be required in terms of us to look at. And honestly, I said I was going to abstain, and so I did. But while y'all were talking about the conditions and everything, I was just looking in detail at the shoreline zoning standards. And honestly, I would have voted against it, because Adam said that there's like no vegetation, and the standards clearly state that the planning board can and should, it says the planning board shall increase the required setback if certain conditions are met, such as steep slopes or non-vegetated areas. And if we don't have that information to look at, we can't make that determination. But then Adam told us himself that it's not vegetated for long stretches. There's like 2 trees. So I think we totally were within our rights to at least discuss an increased setback, because 100 feet, the whole point, if we're looking at the larger picture is, why does the shoreline zoning ordinance even exist? It exists to preserve water quality. And if that's our end goal, then we need the information to do that. And we need to be consistent, because, Adam's coming in confused. Brightside Marina was confused. I don't want lawyers sitting in on the meetings every week. Like, that's not how it should be. I think we should have a clear process, and we should have finding of fact that we do, and we delineate exactly our deliberations and clearly say, this is why we did this. But we have to have information to clearly state that. And so if we don't get the information, then we need to say, we can't review your application. And it's gonna, like we had that discussion earlier with Adam with the village. That's how it is moving forward. That's not how it was 2 years ago. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. And maybe I'm just confused. So let me know your thoughts. I don't know.
So it was just a small little addition going on the second floor. So moving it back wasn't practical at all.
Craig, I think you're muted. I'm sorry. Craig, Craig, you're muted.
And he might be.
It said the host muted me. Anyways, so it's just a small addition going on the second floor. So the way it says about moving it back is to the practical greatest extent. Well, it's nothing practical about moving a whole building for a small addition on the second floor. There's no earthwork going on. So, that's why I would, that's why I wasn't bothered with that. If they would dig in to put an addition on and a foundation, if they were going to lift it up to put a foundation underneath it, well, then you start talking about moving it back to the most practical extent. But they weren't touching the building other than adding on a little bit on the second floor. So, that's,
So I wanted to say that, that's a good point too, Craig. And I hear what Mac, you're saying. I'm a data guy. Part of the reason why we looked at developing that example to go along with the application would be to provide guidance to an applicant so they know we're expecting that type of information. In my opinion, it does the town and the taxpayers a great deal of service when they supply the most amount of information for every application. Then we make informed decisions. Then we can always point to things that we found on the application. Another taxpayer could, if they looked at it, they could point at those things. There's good reason to have that, and that's why I want to encourage them to up their game to provide us that information. So I hear what you're saying.
I guess I would just add, Mac, I appreciate your fresh eyes. There's nothing worse than perpetuating past mistakes. And I've certainly been guilty of that. But the one thing I would add is when we redid this shoreline zoning ordinance a year ago or whenever that was, both in terms of process and in terms of the meat of the ordinance, we've certainly improved it in some key places. The one I would point out is we're one of the few towns that give applicants pretty specific guidance on how to manage stormwater. The state model does not, and consequently most towns just follow that, and I think it just gets lost in the shuffle as a consequence because there's nothing specific there for standard. So that's not to say that we don't have a lot to improve upon in some areas. So anyway, I do appreciate the fresh eyes. I know when I joined the board 5 years ago, I was sort of in the same boat. So, and I don't have your expertise. So,
thank you, and thank you, Mac, for that perspective. And I think going forward for future applications coming in, I think with Adam in particular, he's heard it loud and clear tonight. We as a planning board are expecting more information that's supplied to us so we can make informed decisions. That's important.
Peter?
Yep.
One of the things I'd like to say is I think that in the past, if a lot like Adams was in a shoreline zone, we applied the shoreline ordinance and we didn't apply the minimum lot size ordinance. I don't think we ever did, okay? Just as an example, the lady next to the Sunset Grill that bought that residential house, and the planning board approved her putting in her antique shop or whatever it is, secondhand shop. So based on what our attorney said, she didn't have the required 60,000 square feet. So we shouldn't have allowed her to do that.
Yeah, you make a good point.
You remember that application?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in a shoreline zone, we've always required 200 feet of shore frontage, but we didn't necessarily require 200 feet of road frontage because it was in a shoreline zone. It was the shore frontage that was required. Say if you was developing a new lot or creating a new lot,
Right.
and we didn't look at 200 feet of shore frontage as well as 200 feet of road frontage. We've got a lot of newly created lots in a shoreline zone that have 200 feet of frontage on the shore, but they don't have 200 feet of frontage on the road. And I think the confusion was that we never applied both, nor did we know we had.
Yep. Very good point, Gary. This last particular application there has really been more eye-opening for me about the interaction of the two ordinances.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, in Belgrade Lakes Village, you had that blue building, whatever. It was an antique shop. Let's say it was 3,000 square feet. Let's say there was 3,000 square feet of retail space, and all of a sudden you divide it into 3 sections. It's still 3,000 square feet of retail space.
Right.
So what our attorney is saying is now you have to go so many square feet per each.
I think at first he said, the first statement he said about that was, yeah, it was divided into 3 retail places, but it was still considered 1 retail. And then he moved on talking about something else when he was talking about doubling up to 60,000 square feet. And
Right.
then Adam brought it back on to that. But his first original comment was, well, it's divided into 3, which it was divided anyways. Because
and even if it wasn't, if it was a 3,000 square foot retail space and you divided it into 3 1,000 square foot spaces, what's the difference? It's still 3,000 square feet of retail space.
Right.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It's good stuff, man.
Where is that shop? I'm not even sure. I know.
Right across from Tony Otidy's house, that blue building.
Which one you talking about? Adams?
No.
Oh, I know where Adams is.
No.
The antique shop is.
The antique shop.
Yeah, that's up next to Hewlin Road. That's the one with the white pillars.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Oh, the one you worked on?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. So all I'm saying is that was, let's say it was, I don't know how big it was, but let's say it was 3,000 square feet retail space, and you divided it into 3 1,000 square feet retail space. Now the attorney's saying that you need 60,000 square feet per each. I have to tell you that I don't totally agree with.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't think that's what he said.
Really?
Yeah, not under the minimum lot size ordinance. One thing that is bothersome to me about the shoreline zoning ordinance is the definitions or lack thereof of accessory, principal use and accessory use. And when you define things by, it's not something else, like, principal use is not an accessory use. I mean, that's the gist of the definition. It just makes it very confusing.
It does.
And I know some of that is established in, legal cases, but how the heck are we supposed to know that?
No, I know. All I'm saying is I don't think we ever applied the minimum lot size ordinance in the Belgrade Lakes Village when the buildings were in a shoreline zone. I think we used the shoreline zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
Which is a lesser standard when it comes to density.
Gary, you probably know far better than I, but the getting back to that the former red house next to the Sunset Grill there, when we approved that, I recalled that it had quite a bit of back square footage, I thought when Adam was talking about that, he may have been talking about lack of road frontage.
Maybe, but nevertheless,
Yeah, nevertheless.
that was a residential house that was converted to a retail space for antiques or whatever she does. And whether it was density or road frontage, she didn't meet the ordinance,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I certainly didn't think of it.
No,
I did
and
not.
I didn't think of it until the attorney sent that interpretation, and I went, wow, I don't think we've ever done that down there. I don't think we've ever looked at that.
Yeah, not before Brightside.
One, right, and not before the attorney's interpretation.
Right.
So, I don't know.
It's more eye-opening for us, and now we can be more aware, you know.
Exactly.
Well, we need to fix it.
Right. You know,
There's that too, right? Yeah, like we talked about, you know, a citizens initiative to go modernize and update the ordinances. You know, that would be appropriate.
and and I agree with Craig, and I agree with the comprehensive plan. That's where you want your businesses in the Belgrade Lakes Village.
Yeah, exactly.
I
mean,
Craig, you hit the nail on the head in terms of your comment about sprawl.
Right.
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 Right. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
The challenge down there is, you know, I alluded to it, is, you know, making sure you have adequate room or require the kind of engineered wastewater systems to be able to allow, you know, dense development. I mean, I remember when I was still working at DEP and Dave's Store had their leaking underground gas tank.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, the smell of septage in there was unbelievable when that was dug up.
Yep. Yep. So, I don't know. But anyway, sounds like you have a lot on your plate.
We do. So I just want to make sure I ask this, you know, the board, not to answer tonight, but would you be interested in doing an additional meeting in October? So please think about it and let me know.
Also, I'm going to say, when's our next meeting? Is it in 2 weeks?
Yes.
15th.
15th. Okay, then after that, I'm going in for surgery, so I may not make the following one won't be until November, correct? Yeah, so I should be fine. So I'm probably good for one meeting this month anyways, so one more meeting.
Okay.
I'm gonna be laid up for 3 months, so.
Oh, no.
Man.
So I'll be able to do meetings on Zoom, but to get back to work, it'll be 3 months.
Yeah. I'm not working, so, you know, I would defer to whatever those of you that actually work for a living do. Works best for you. But, you know, if we were to do another meeting, it might be most manageable if we restricted it just to the shoreline zoning, the subdivision ordinance, because that's a 1 hour contained subject, and
Right.
we have more control over that than we do applications that tend to ramble on.
Yep.
Right.
I'd be willing to do that.
Okay.
For the 22nd.
So before the 22nd, Craig?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's think about ways to make that happen so we could can involve you. Thank you very much for that offer too, before the 22nd, knowing you're going to go in for surgery. So,
Just to clarify, Craig, you could meet in November, an extra meeting, just not in October because you're physically going into surgery.
Well, it depends. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to hold my head up. You know, they're going to take a vertebrae out through the front of my neck and bolt me back together.
Oh, God.
So I don't know how long I'll be able to sit here in the chair
Yeah,
Good point.
that sounds,
right afterwards.
that sounds painful.
Yeah.
Good luck. Holy cow.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Where are you having that surgery done, Craig?
Down in Northern Light in Portland, Mercy Hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's right. Okay.
Getting old sucks, don't it?
Yeah, it does.
All right. So I'd like to just ask you if by the 15th we could decide if we could do something to deal with subdivision ordinance or a special meeting before the 22nd somehow
Yes, during the week. Yep.
during the week, like a weeknight. So
So it's, if it's before the 22nd of October, shouldn't we like decide now or, I mean,
we can if everybody's willing.
I'm just afraid if we wait till the 15th, that's literally a week before the 22nd, then it's not going to happen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Good point. So you want to do it the 22nd? It should be a Thursday.
But Craig can't do it the 22nd.
Yeah, so it'd have to be next Thursday, basically the 8th, right?
It's a week from today. And the 21st doesn't work, right?
I don't know. Get everything
He's
situated.
already planning on taking his good drugs by then.
Yeah, I don't blame you. All right.
I mean, we're just looking at the subdivision ordinance, correct?
Yes.
That's what we're suggesting. That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm down for next Thursday. We'll start at 6.
I would have to, just real quick, we would also make sure Nick is available for that meeting, I would assume, correct?
Right.
So,
And we would also need to, he asked us, and Anthony did too, to highlight, to go through the rest of the model ordinance and highlight anything we, really want to talk about or suggested changes.
So Nick, if you could see if Nick is available for next Thursday, and because it sounds like we're in agreement that we will try to go for it for next Thursday, which is the 8th. Let's try it.
okay. I'll talk to Anthony, we'll talk to Nick, and if Nick is down, I'll shoot you all an email saying
Okay.
the 8th, is a go or not a go?
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you all for volunteering for that. I really appreciate that. I think that's it for tonight. Just thank you all so much for all that you do for the town. It's a big job, and I know a lot of people like to complain about how stuff doesn't get done, or they bitch about what happens, but few actually volunteer, and all of you do. So thank you very much.
You likewise.
You bet. All right, gentlemen, have a great night, and congratulations to the Baker family. They got moose in the freezer. All right, thanks everybody.
All right.
All right.
Good night.